the Finance Committee meeting of Tuesday, October 12th, 2021. I'll ask Dave to call the roll.
Council President Abbas.
Present.
Alder Carter.
Present.
Alder Verveer.
Here.
Alder Furman.
Present.
Alder Figueroa Cole.
Here.
Alder Curry.
Here.
Mary of Quorum.
Thank you. Can we have the meeting instructions, please?
Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members of the committee, if you're able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video when you're speaking. In this meeting, panelists have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Panelists also have the ability to add pronouns after their names if they choose. Please do not alter the current naming convention. Simply add text after your name. Please use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Staff, please use the raise hand feature when you're asked a question. The chair will do their best to call in committee members in the order in which hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. Staff will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the committee, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Are there any disclosures or recusals on the executive operating budget? Seeing none. We have a slight dilemma before us for members of the body. We do have a number of folks registered as wanting to speak, at least some of whom require interpretation, but our interpreter is not able to be here until 5 o'clock at the earliest. So is there any objection to taking up one agency to get us to 5 o'clock and then coming back to public comment when we actually have the interpreter on the line? Seeing no objection. Let's do that. And so we'll start with the city attorney's office.
Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon. I was going to say I think we could get the Finance Committee off to a fast start with our budget, since ours is pretty straightforward and relatively small. Sue Mounts is, I'm Mike Haas, city attorney. Sue Mounts is also online with us. She's our administrative supervisor and office manager and budget guru, among other hats. So as our slide indicates, our budget in the executive budget is a cost to continue budget with a $10,000 reduction. We are maintaining our current staffing, not adding or subtracting any. We've had some concern over the last couple of years about being able to continue with our intern program with law students, but we feel like we will be able to continue that. As you know, we are an internal facing agency, so we largely support other city departments in their initiatives, including the town of Madison attachment and other priorities. Our reductions are basically, the relatively small reductions in supplies, paper, printing, training, furniture, and we did not have any supplemental requests in the executive budget. I think that pretty much covers it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mike. Are there questions for the city attorney? Going once, going twice, seeing none. Thank you very much, Mike and Sue, for being here. And we'll go on to civil rights.
Right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm Norm Davis. I'm the Civil Rights Director for the city. With me also is Michael Gibson, our Administrative Supervisor. We appreciate the opportunity to present to Finance Committee. And I also want to acknowledge the DCR staff, including our leadership team and all of the supportive teams, the NRTs, the Racial Equity and Social Justice Initiative teams, because they all had a part in helping to develop our budget, our proposed 2022 budget. So our budget is largely cost to continue budget. Our budget is largely salaries. Most of the funds in our budget are directed toward the staff that we have in our multiple service areas to serve the public. Just as a reminder, part of that cost to continue, which we're grateful for the continued funding of, includes $51,000 for our racial equity and social justice programming, around $27,500 for neighborhood resource teams, $132,000 for language access programming. And we are able to continue with our hourly budget of about $38,500 for largely our Aspire program work, and also for some language access work to supplement the other programming funds that we have. For 2022, you'll see that there is a reduction of about $7,000. That largely memberships that our agency has maintained, except for those memberships that are necessary for members of our staff to maintain licensing or accreditation. We're able to retain the funding for those memberships. It's also a reduction for the Multicultural Affairs Committee and the Women's Initiatives Committee. DCR has a small amount of funding that we've had for them from year to year. But given that this is a one-time cut, one-time reduction, I'm hopeful that they can continue with the great work that they've been doing without those funds this coming year. And then there's miscellaneous expenses that were also reduced from DCR. So that's sort of the picture for the reduction in funds. And then I'm really happy to report that in this budget there is funding for a community connector position. These community connector positions are going to be key, I think, to the continued success of language access in the city of Madison. As you can see from the notes here, it's a bilingual and bicultural position. It's a part-time position, and the 60% full-time will actually allow us to provide benefits for this individual that's serving in this role. So it's a part-time position that will advance culturally appropriate language access services. One of the things that we've learned over COVID and over the last, let's say, year and a half, 2 years, is that many of our populations that are multilingual or speaking languages that are not English, don't only need the interpretation or the translation, but really need that connection so that we can provide them with meaningful access and meaningful services. And so it will really create that opportunity for us to assess and refine the connections that we have within the community. The current funding of $132,000 for language access services would be retained. And so this is adding capacity. This is on top of that, so that our Equity and Social Justice Division can better serve Spanish-speaking members of our community. We're really hopeful that as we hire this individual and start down this path with more intention toward the communities, making that cultural connection, that we'll be able to assess this new approach We've recently discovered that Somerville, Massachusetts, has a very similar structure in the way that they approach community connectors, and we're hoping to learn from them as well as some other municipalities. And when budget conditions allow, that we would be able to expand to additional languages, cultures, and community members.
Thank you, Norm. Are there questions for DCR? Alder Curry?
Thank you, Mayor. And hi, Norm. Sorry, I am not in a place to be looking at a budget book or screens. I'm in the car. My question is related to NRTs, and without looking at anything, wanted to hear a little bit more about, like, are there NRTs funded at the same level? Or are there some NRTs that need more resources, and kind of how that trickles down to the neighborhoods?
Sure. So, the funds that we have are really directed across all of the NRTs. And so our staff have a practice of working with the NRTs to assess what the needs are within the communities. Sometimes it's just a matter of bringing different departments together to provide solutions, to work things out so that we're able to provide solutions for a neighborhood. Sometimes there's a need for more funding. And sometimes there's a need to bring the neighborhood together and to provide spaces and opportunities, events to bring the neighborhoods together. So as the NRT meetings are happening on a monthly basis, and then the NRT leadership meetings, we're hearing from NRT members of the community about the needs, and then we work out, just what level of funding or what level of bringing staff together would be necessary to meet the needs of each neighborhood.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for Norm? Right, seeing none. Thank you, Norm and Michaelin, for being here. And we will go on to the clerk's office.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening. I'm Nikki Perez. I'm a certified clerk in the clerk's office. Mary Beth is unable to be here tonight, so I am filling in. This should be pretty quick. We have one major highlight in our budget, and that is we are administering 4 elections in 2022. This includes the November gubernatorial election. In 2018, we saw about 92% turnout in that November election, and we expect similar turnout. We will continue to provide COVID safety precautions in all elections to protect our voters and poll workers from COVID exposure. For reductions, we have 3. The first is we will be partnering with fleet services to transport election equipment instead of third-party contractors that we have done previously. The second reduction is a reduce in advertising that's not legally required. This is primarily our voter outreach advertising. And then the third reduction is reducing polling place greeter positions. We plan to prioritize which sites to implement this change. And of course, we encourage city employees to step up and be greeters. So that is actually all I have, and I will do my best to answer any questions.
Thank you, Nikki. Are there questions for the clerk's office? Going once, going twice. Alder Verveer.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Nikki. Good to see you. I don't know if this is a fair question for you, and it might be more appropriate for Dave or one of his colleagues in the finance department. But I was curious about the revenue line item for clerk's office issue licenses. And that's on, for those of you that have the budget books, on page 9 of the budget books. Would so again, I think this might be more appropriate for Dave or whoever is responsible for revenue these days amongst the analysts. but I was looking at the clerk's line item, again, clerk's license line item, and I was wondering if there could be an explanation as to where the estimate was, knowing that, well, this is one question for you, Nikki, that just to confirm, for everyone's benefit, operator licenses are renewed every even numbered year, correct?
That is correct.
And do you know a ballpark figure about how many of those are at $90 a piece?
Several thousand. I don't have a exact number.
Yeah. And then we're still waiving all late fees, correct? Due to the pandemic?
I believe so.
Uh-huh. So I was wondering if, again, if Dave or one of his colleagues in the budget office could explain the clerk's license line item and the formula used for that estimate, please.
Revere, we basically just sort of kept it at prior year levels with that adjustment that we normally do for the biennial amounts. We still have seen those revenues come in, less than budgeted levels due to the pandemic. And we're continuing to monitor that through 2021.
I appreciate that. My thought, Dave, was when I look at the actual line item of $750,000, I thought, and again, I'm going to 2020 actual because that was the last even numbered year, of course, and those biennial operator licenses, it seemed that perhaps we might be being overly optimistic with the $1 million projection. And I wondered if I was missing something, or if there was some assumption that we might be raising some new revenue through fee increases, license fee increases.
No,
That's not the case, Dave.
that's not the case. No.
Okay, so we're just being optimistic.
I don't know if that was a question, Oliver Revere.
Yeah, I guess it wasn't. Maybe it was a rhetorical question. I don't want to put words in
I would
your
say
mouth.
we don't know the pace of recovery. I think we are at least being maybe hopeful is a better word, that we'll return to closer to pre-pandemic levels by 2022. But given that we don't have a lot of information yet on 2021, or we're continuing to monitor that, we'll just have to see what happens with that area.
All right. Thank you, Dave. And thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for the clerk's office? Seeing none. Thank you, Nikki. Appreciate you filling in. And I understand we now have our interpreter on the line. So let's pause here and go to public comment. All right, so I'm not sure. We have some overlap with last night. I don't see either Nicholas Lumos or Anthony Cooper on the line.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Do we have Dia Lor Vang
We do.
of District 14 to be followed by Her Yang?
Hi, so we have, I registered, I think around 11 folks, but there's 4 folks here that are using the same account to here. So is it okay for them to go to talk to here?
Absolutely. Can you just make sure that we know their names before they start? And each person has 3 minutes unless they need interpretation, and then they have 6 minutes.
Yeah, they will need interpretation.
Okay. We have an interpreter here.
Okay, so có mà hai luôn anh đấy, hai có luôn bé về có hai sau có hai đã gì cho mà mua
Cơ mà bè đó.
luôn mà bé nó mới tên em bé
Vậy thì mình nó hộp. Hai đó. Ha. Nhớ đâu. Của nhà xe vào.
Hello, my name is Sieva.
Trong xe tuần chi nè.
It's a pleasure to meet all of you.
Chỉ có hai đứa tôi chả hai mẹ xưa cô sai thì nè cho và quan nào của chú nè ba bé cho lâu theo bé tự gió nhảy cứ đi đâu.
She I don't know much to say, but I just want to share with you as leaders to please help us elders.
Bé cho lâu từ trò nhẹ bé chỉ có một thiên nào li sao có cho nó cho chữ họ lúc bé theo ba bé thành cái vang cái chế bé theo nhớ tàu để trả bé chỉ xe bé một đại tua.
We are struggling financially and we would like help from all of you to support us. Otherwise, it just makes it hard for our daily living.
Cũng hay liên đỡ xưa.
That is it. Thank you.
Okay. Nhớ phải theo cho bố lý theo. Okay.
Nhớ rong à.
Hello.
Cô chỉ bảo hạ chỉ theo đấy chỉ mà ở đây cô hay cô sai thì bé cho tụi con nhẹ nó giờ cô sai có quân nhớ lỡ mất sai thì bé cho lâu nó một khứ chỉ tàu là để mình nhỏ là mà nó mang đi lúc khứ tàu luôn nó xứ còn lỡ ba bé thì mình vang đi chế là do tên đi vạch phá tên đỡ kỳ chế cô sai thì do này cho bao lù nó chế nên họ ba thì sẽ bé họ cho lô họ tôi hay ở bé lò lên nó chỗ này thì sẽ lỡ họ có ba tàu mình chỉ nhiệt chia đồ bé nó.
I am another elder that would like to share. I also struggle financially, and I know that my children, they only make enough to for their own living as well, and so I want to ask for help with bills and things like that, so that way I don't struggle financially.
Can you ask her name, please?
Của dân thầy
Her name
dân
is
thầy nó xong nè.
her name is Chai Zhang.
Thank you.
Tôi của hạt kia nên tôi cho Polina tôi nhận đồng tôi lấy cái chỉ quá chỉ cái là thọ cả lấy mua Poli cho nhảy cho là phát cái theo cả bé车子做nhảy nó.
Is it possible to help relocate some funding in the city so that way we can get some funding to help us?
And she's specifically talking about the police funds. That's what she says. Okay.
Hello. My name is Mai Vu.
Rong xe bé sinh chi bé chỉ bảo chị của là hai bé lò thì bé cho tôi nhớ nó bé bán hết chỉ một chỉ sư bé cho những cái bé sát thọ này cho qua nọ chứ có ba bé thì bé cho bé thấy đồ và đồ chỉ nhớ.
It's a pleasure to meet all of you tonight. Many of us struggle, and many of us that are talking tonight are single parents without husbands. And so it's very hard for us. And we would like to share this with you as leaders to find some resources, funding to help us.
Bé cho nhau nó mà bé mua cậu tự lăng nhau không chỉ nào mà bé còn lại ba chỉ mua chỉ sẽ bé cho nhiều ba này là lâu chỉ cho cứ bé sao thì hôm nay sau đó ba tàu gì gặp ba mình chỉ nghe rồi bé thành cái văn cái chế thành cái phải thế bé thế thì chỉ nhiều xe nên không nhau sắp phát ra gì là có mua xe
There are over 10 of us living in this neighborhood or in this facility, and it's just really hard for us. And again, us just being single parents or just without husbands, we don't know what to do to have income, and we find ourselves struggling, and we want to ask for support.
Nó cho chú họ mới như chú cha đồ bù lì nó chỉ họ ba mẹ đồ bé cả bé thì chúng mình lại tổ nó bé thì là chỉ nhiều xe bé ba này lo chúng mình chỉ suy chế bé cho chỉ tổ ta bé nhiều xe lì nó nữa.
All of our husbands have passed, and we would like to see if it's possible, if there are some funds, as shared earlier, through funds that were allocated for the police department to help us, just to help us so that way it would help us to be in a better mental state of mind. Thank you very much. Hello again. My name is C. Lee. Today is a special day for me because I have the chance to talk to all of you leaders. I have many illnesses and I am unable to work, and so the money that I have is just enough to pay for some of the very basic needs, and so I struggle. I have medications I have to pay for as well, and luckily in the summer months I have family and friends who are able to bring produce to help me as well. This is still C. Lee talking, and I just want to share that I recently had surgery on my stomach as well, and it's very hard for me to go. I'm not mobile right now, so it's hard for me to be able to navigate around, and it's really hard for me to even find or prepare food for myself as well. And so I would appreciate any assistance that can be provided to help me.
Okay, and then we have one more lady who just joined us that was also on the list. So I'm gonna have her talk.
Oh, my name is Lia Xiong. Hello, Marcelo. Okay.
My name is Bia Zhang.
Cô mà tận nhà hàng đó cô tự chỉ qua thả cho lên thì phải tôi chạy của những chụp bỏ chạy của lạ qua đau cho luộc khẽ tôi tới chả nào là của những tận nhà hàng.
I struggle financially right now. I am living in poverty. My husband has passed away. He was a veteran. He was a soldier in Laos, and so today I struggle financially.
Cú bụp lắm tụi mình nhỏ tôi là đây tôi thấy chuyện nó mà cũng có những cơn cầu đi chỗ ta sẽ chỉ tu chứ.
I was able to
Không cả ba mà tại những cơn cầu đi.
I was able to bring 4 children with me over here to the US, but it was just lucky that we all made it here and we are all struggling.
Thì qua hai chỗ này thì có nên lưu thế. Nên ba bây giờ nên lâu nó thế tao nhẹ mua cái mua qua chỉ tao ăn chơi nên nu mua nhau chơi sẽ thọ nên lưu thế này ha. Ba bây theo.
I beg that if you're able to, please help people like me and others here who are just old and not able to do much to help ourselves and just struggling with many things.
Vậy luôn có một lò xe chỉ bắt ai là thế. Nên cho nên cái chuyện này sẽ biết tận nhẹ nó cho nên lúc thà biết cho nên lâu nó tận nhẹ chỉ bắt ai là thế. Thọ nên lúc thế nên họ ba biết theo.
Please help me and other people like me. Every time I share things like this, I just cry and tears just come because it's just so hard and I don't know what to do. So I hope that just by sharing this with you all tonight, that you're able to find a way to help and support me and others like me.
Lấy luôn xe lấy mua rau hỏi lấy qua hồ lửa tàu nhiên nó nhiên li nên chẳng hạn ba lời nên họ chỉ lúc bây giờ nên lâu nó thế mà bé mà hoàn全都是只把爱还了的。
We look and sometimes there are other people who seem to be physically more able or have more skills than us, and yet they receive help. And so we hope that you guys are able to find a way to help us as well.
She specifically was talking about the police and how they have a lot of money and that they should actually love elders, love our Southeast Asian elders, our people of color, and invest in us instead of giving money to people who already have a lot of money who are doing well. Yeah, and that is basically everyone who needs to speak today.
Thank you, and thank you for facilitating that. And if the interpreter could just thank them all, please.
And
thank you. She says that she has no parents right now. It's just her and her 4 children, and she is just living in poverty right now. Right, thank you for your help. I think in order of speaking, that was Dia Laura Vang from District 14, Sia Vang from District 13, Chai Zhang from District 12, Mai Vu from District 13, Zi Li from District 13, and Dia Zhang from District 13 also. Are there questions for any of the registrants? Right, seeing no questions, thank you again to our registrants and to our interpreter. And we will go on then, assuming that Stefan, we don't have any of the other folks registered in the queue.
Correct.
All right, so then we are back to our briefings at the Employee Assistance Program. Teresa?
Hi, everyone. I'm Teresa Martinez. I'm the manager of the city's Employee Assistance Program and the trauma response services that we provide. Just as a reminder, we are an internal-external program model, meaning that we have internal staff, one of whom is on the meeting with me tonight, Sherry Amos, who's our program assistant. She's our program assistant confidential budget contact, and I just call her the backbone of the program. We also have 2 professional master's level clinical social workers and myself. The the external employee assistance program that provides that service for us is out of Milwaukee. They're called FEI, but they subcontract with local providers in the Madison area. It hasn't been as much of an issue with the virtual services now, but they do have contracts with many local EAP providers through mental health clinics in the area. Really, this is very simple for us. We have really no major changes whatsoever. We do have a $7,000 decrease in that external employee assistance provider line, just to bring it in line with current spending. That said, that expense can fluctuate, and we keep a close eye on that. Employees have the option to utilize the internal program or the external program. We use the external program for specialized services like mediation, couples counseling, assistance with trauma response when needed, and other kinds of work group intervention services. So we keep a close eye on that. We meet with finance quarterly to see what that looks like. But we did decrease at 7,000 to bring it closer to where we are right now with that line. We received 6,000 to maintain the external hosting of our EAP data. We do store our EAP data on an external server that is housed, maintained, and managed by people who have behavioral health qualifications to ensure the privacy of that data. And then lastly, I'm very happy to say that we've made efforts to expand the diversity of our EAP staff. Our two newest counselors come from the UW. They're both Spanish-speaking counselors, highly skilled in many areas that are going to benefit the city. They bring expertise and experience in supporting a diverse employee population, and our goals as a program is to work to align organizational expectations along with things like employee inclusion, equity, safety, and a sense of belonging in our organization. So I think that's it.
Thank you, Teresa. Are there questions for EAP? Going once. Going twice. Seeing no questions. Thank you very much, Teresa and Sherry, for being here.
Thank you.
And we'll go on to finance. Dave?
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Finance Committee members. For the Finance Department, our major highlights include a new internal audit service that's created to focus on that area. As you probably recall, in prior meetings, we've been working towards revamping and restarting our internal audit activities. We recently took a vacant position in the department and reclassed it to an internal audit manager. And that position will be filled later in 2022, just given the difference in cost between the former position and the reclass position. We'll just need some time to do that. But that recruitment should begin soon in 2022 and begin that process of restarting internal audit activities. For reductions, in our document services area, we have a vacant document services specialist 2, which we're going to fill as a document services specialist 1, and that saves $19,000. And then in terms of a supplemental, with the property owners in the current town of Madison who will be coming into the city of Madison, we just have some additional funding to support the printing of tax bills for those individuals, and those taxes will be printed in for the first time in 2022. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Dave. Are there questions for finance? Going once. Going twice. Not seeing any questions for finance. Alder Harrington McKinney. Alder Harrington McKinney, you're muted. Did you have a question?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask, do we have a sense of what the, with the incoming of the city of Madison, do we have any idea of what the tax base will look like, or at what time would that be assessed?
Alder Harrington McKinney, with the town being attached to the city in taxes for 2022, which are levied this December of 2021, those will be levied and collected by the town. And their levy is a little over $2 million. Then beginning in taxes levied in December of 2022 and collected in 2023, so that'll be the city's 2023 budget. The city will get a levy limit adjustment that'll probably be close to about 70 to 75% of the town's levy. The city of Fitchburg will get the remaining amount. That division will be made based on the taxes on the parcels that either come into the city of Madison or come into the city of Fitchburg. Similarly, any other revenues, for example, state aid or charges for services, the state aid will probably be primarily divided based on equalized value. So the value of the property is split between the two cities, and charges for services will be, however, the current residents of the town who come into the city of Madison, what services they avail themselves of, whether it be operator licenses or building permits, although we're already getting building permit revenues, other sort of general fund revenues, stormwater fees and things like that. So probably the major element is that levy limit change, which will probably be around, like I said, maybe a little under $2 million, but that won't take effect until 2023.
Okay, and my follow-up question is, and I know that this is a question not based upon the facts that you have, in line with the services that will be offered coming into the city of Madison, the level of services that will be coming into the city of Madison, is there a percentage of what that additional cost would be to us in terms of a percentage?
So the city, city agencies, we've engaged in a process over the last 2 years of getting an inventory from all the affected city agencies of the cost, what they think the cost might be for expanding services to town, those areas of the town that are coming into the city and the residents in those areas. Some of that has been incorporated into the 2022 budget. So there's about $1.4 million that's in the 2022 budget. The amount in 2023 is probably going to be closer to 3 million perhaps. That'll be on top of the 1.4 million, but obviously that'll be a 2023 budget decision. Plus we'll annualize some of the costs that you see in this 2022 executive budget, namely a full year of police officers, a full year of the streets and streets division employees and so on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Carter.
Yeah, Dave, can you tell me, on the same line of Alder McKinney, but we have attached, I believe, was it last year or the year before? Was it Blooming Grove?
We've not attached the entire town of Blooming Grove. We have attached parcels. We have a intergovernmental boundary agreement with Blooming Grove, and I think Blooming Grove comes in, I think, in the next 6 years or so. Town of Burke, there's also an attachment agreement that I think is probably in the 2030s, I think. But we have not attached the entire town, for example, where the town is going away, like the town of Madison is. They have attached parcels to the city.
Have those tax rolls already been applied for us, or are they going to the municipality of Blooming Grove?
So usually when we attach parcels under an agreement, those parcels come into the city. We get a levy limit adjustment for the amount of the town taxes. And then we put the city levy on that. Often we have a revenue sharing agreement with the town, the affected town, where we pay back some or all of that, the amount of what had been the town taxes. Usually that attachment is for, let's say, some form of economic development project, perhaps to get city, certain types of city services. And for the town to agree to the attachment, there is usually some sort of provision, as I just described, where we will pay the town back those taxes under a revenue sharing agreement for some span of time. It may be until the town dissolves, when the agreement, the timetable under the intergovernmental agreement comes into place. We have some of those arrangements with the town of Madison for certain parcels that have come into the city. We have a revenue sharing agreement. Probably one example of that is a parcel where a new hotel was just built at the interchange of Rimrock Road, and we have to share some of those room taxes with the town, as well as I think on some of those parcels we have to share the revenues collected, which are effectively what the prior town property taxes were.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for finance? Right, seeing none, thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
HR is next. Harper?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Harper Donahue, Department of Human Resources. I'm joined by Brad Wallman. Brad, if you're on, can you turn on your camera and wave? Brad is the department's budget and data coordinator. He's been doing some great work with our citywide initiatives in regards to engagement. But I'll jump right in regards to our highlights and major changes. We are getting $50,000 for new software to help us in managing personnel documents and streamlining our onboarding processes. There's a one-time reduction of $25,000 from our training and consulting services line. This is based on activity for the previous 2 years. Again, that's a one-time reduction. And we'll also be experiencing a $10,000 reduction of funding for our citywide drug testing program. And back to in regards to our supplemental request, that is the $50,000 to assist us with some of our onboarding work. And with that, we'll be eliminating some of the paper-based forms we have. This past year, we experienced some challenges in regards to processing some of our new hires. This will assist us with that. It will also cut into some of the travel time for folks dropping off paperwork, and it'll just improve some of the efficiencies as far as processing new hires. But that's pretty much summing up where we're at right now. I appreciate your time and open to any questions you all might have.
Thanks, Harper. Are there questions for HR? Alder Harrington McKinney?
Thank you. Harper, could you say more about the one-time $25,000 reduction in funding for training and consulting services. What is that training? Could you be a little bit more specific or give an example of what that covers?
Sure. So some of the training is for members in my department. Some of the training is used to assist other folks throughout the city. We also do consult. We hire out RFPs to have folks come in and do training for the city. So based on the usage that we have for the previous 2 years, we did maximize the amounts that we had in those budget lines. And to assist the city, that was something that we put on the chopping block.
Okay, and one final question is that your department would not be involved in any diversity training. Would that would not be that would not sit in your department? Is that correct, or am I not correct?
You are not correct. We actually do quite a bit as far as assisting when it comes to diversity training. Yeah, we do quite a bit.
Okay. Well, now it opens up to a final question. When you say quite a bit, could you give me an example of the diversity training that comes out of your department?
Sure. I mean, when you talk about the women's leadership conferences that we put on, Brad, if you can jump in, you probably have a little more as far as the details, but a lot of that training actually comes to our shop. Brad, can you recall specific trainings that would, as far as responding to Alder McKinney's question?
Yeah, I think you started off very good there, Harper, with the women's leadership and then the inclusive leadership events that we did this spring. Those will be the ones that come to mind immediately.
Yep, and as well as supporting the Black Women's Wellness Foundation, different things along those lines. Like that is a part as far as our shop, working with the Department of Civil Rights and the rest of the city.
Okay, and you do work with the Department of Civil Rights in doing diversity and inclusive training?
Correct.
Am I understand? Okay, all right.
Sure, as well as Mac and Wick. Yep, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Carter.
Thank you, Mayor. Harper, can you tell me if we have with the city management training program?
Yeah, we do. We have our leadership development program. We have the Team City. We actually have quite a bit of training. Most of our training is around leadership programming.
And that leadership programming includes the diversity training or some aspect of that and of culture competency?
Sure, if not, we're supporting it, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alder Carter. Are there any other questions for HR? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Harper, and thank you, Brad.
Thank you.
And we'll go to IT. Sarah?
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Finance Committee. My name is Sarah Edgerton, and I am the IT Director. And with me today is Amanda Lith-Johan, who is our Administrative and Budget Manager. So highlights for and major changes for the IT operating budget for 2022. We have an increase of annual software subscriptions and maintenance costs of $85,000. This is something that you'll see every year. This is due to the increases that our vendors provide for us, request from us for our maintenance and our subscription costs. And as we also move capital projects that have software purchases over to operating, that will also increase that maintenance cost amount. And then we also have a $1.5 million annual subscription maintenance cost for Microsoft 365. As many of you may recall, last year in our capital budget, it was approved to purchase Microsoft 365, and we are going through the implementation right now in 2021 and 2022. And as we noted in 2021 in our capital budget, operating costs would begin in 2022. So this is that increase of $1.5 million to our operating budget. So for our reduction scenarios, we have an open IT technical services manager. So that is a top manager position on IT. We are going to be taking that position and moving it down one level. So we'll be underfilling it. And then we are also going to be keeping that vacant open in that position open until June of 2022. And that position is going to become our cybersecurity officer for the city of Madison. We recognize this is a great need and that this is how we can fill that need. So we are going to have 7 teams they're going to be reporting to one manager. And then several of the other teams will now start reporting to me. We are also underfilling, and we are currently doing that right now. At Savings for the City, we underfilled 3 IT positions, and that is a one-time savings of $13,000. Our supplemental request. So we have a request, and this is actually a request for Public Health Madison-Dane County, but I'm noting it in ours so that you can see it. It's a new IT specialist position for public health. It will be a project manager. Public health pre-pandemic was one of our top customers, and as you can well imagine is our top customer right now. And they need to have a project manager to help coordinate with all of the requests that are coming out of public health for IT, and helping to prioritize, to do a lot of the back and forth work that we are doing between public health and IT staff right now to help increase efficiencies that we are seeing that are stopping public health from being able to move as quickly as they would like to. And we would like to provide a more agile environment for public health in getting the IT services that they need. And then the other position that we are requesting is a new media team position to support the audiovisual needs for the city of Madison. And we are asking that this is actually charged back to the capital budget and not the IT operating budget. And this is at an estimated ongoing cost of about $75,000. And that is what I have.
Thank you, Sarah. Alder Figueroa Cole.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Mayor. Can you please elaborate on that media team position? What is that for? The audio visual systems?
Sure. So the IT department has been supporting all of the AV needs for the city. And so that includes all of the different displays that you see at the Metro bus stops, all of the systems, the display systems and monitors that you see throughout the city county building and in the Madison Municipal building, the public libraries, CDA housing, the list goes on. And the media team supports all of that hardware and software. And then on top of it, as we start to move to more internal meetings where we're doing, some staff are working from home and some staff are in the office, we need to have those hybrid systems set up. That's what this position would also be supporting. This position would have to specific systems and specifications and coding that go along with our AV systems that we have in place right now. The other hope is that this position will be able to do a more coordinated effort across the city as we continue to grow as a city, in making sure that our AV systems align with the systems that we currently have and where we want to move to. That's kind of in a nutshell what that position would be doing.
Is there any funding or anything, any discussions in regards to changing, to continue to do the Zoom meetings, after the pandemic?
Yes, and that you see some of that funding in our operating costs. We have the maintenance for Zoom to continue to move forward. And then we also have in our capital budget, the funding for Zoom meetings. I think in particular, the hybrid meetings, we have that hardware and software there. The idea with this position is that this position is going to take on some of the additional work that the media team has. So the media team does not just cover boards, commission, and committee meetings. They do an incredible amount of other work as part of their portfolio. And that work has not been able to be addressed to the standard that they would like. And we're hoping that this position would help to support that and to alleviate the amount of work and overtime that we are seeing of our team members.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for IT? Alder Carter?
Sarah, when you're talking about Zoom, do we have the government version of Zoom?
We do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alder Harrington McKinney.
Thank you. And Sarah, I have a question about, you mentioned the amount of overtime. Is there an estimate or a percentage that you can give us in the amount of overtime that you were referencing so that I'm clear and I don't want to just kind of guess what the specific task is, but I just want an overall view of what the increase in your overtime for your staff has been.
I'm going to ask Amanda to answer that question. I have an Excel spreadsheet she sent me and it would take me too long, and I'm guessing she probably knows that number pretty quickly.
Sarah, I apologize. I meant to pull that up and I don't have it handy, but I will pull it up and we'll get the information over to you.
But Alder McKinney, I would like to just note that because we have had vacancies in IT and in retirement, we have been able to absorb those costs without showing any overtime in our budget. So there has not been any hit to the 2021 budget because we have been able to absorb that. And in fact, we were also able to do that in 2020.
Okay, thank you very much. And when you get that number, when you get those numbers, you can send those over to me, but I'm complete with your response.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for IT? Alder Halverson?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question. Is there provision in the budget for cybersecurity?
Yes, it's in our capital budget. That's where we put the funding. And then we also have in our operating the maintenance for other work. So this position then would have that capital budget to work with. There's a program for cybersecurity.
All right, appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any other questions for IT? Seeing none. Thank you, Sarah and Amanda. And we are headed for the Public Works group, starting with engineering and the utilities. Rob?
Good evening. I'm Rob Phillips, city engineer, and I'll go over our 4 operating budgets this evening. I also have with me Kathy Krein, Deputy Division Manager, Greg Fries, Deputy City Engineer, Steve Dana Rivers, our Financial Manager, and Sarah Lerner and Carissa Wagner as well, if we really get stumped on the median landscaping part. So start with the general fund budget. We've got supplementals here, the Green Power Program. We're very proud of the Green Power Program. That was largely due to the great work of Kathy Krein and her staff, who put a really good program together. So far, as of the end of the 2020, we've hired 16 hourly trainees. 10 of them are male, 6 are female. But of course, this is a very male-dominated field at the current time. Of the 16, 11 out of 16 were Black, Indigenous, or people of color. 6 of those folks went on to city employment. 6 were hired by a contractor, and 2 continued their education. So we feel like that is having the impact that we're after. And of course, in addition to that, we are competitive in the installation of our solar electric solar energy goals, as well as lighting retrofit projects. We currently are running 2 green power crews, and before you this evening as part of the budget is a 3rd crew, and that is for 1 full-time electrician, 2 trainees at a cost of $500,000 funded through capital. The second supplemental before you this evening is the infrastructure and sidewalk repair program that's modeled after the green power program. Just to give you a little background here, there's 2 major components to sidewalk repair. There's the ordered sidewalk program that includes 2 aldermanic districts per year. And then there's the citywide repairs. And those are needed repairs throughout the city. So the difference is that in the 2 aldermanic districts that we do each year, we go through the city and we mark all that out. And the citywide repairs, that's mostly by request, and it's all over the place. This crew would be doing the citywide repairs. The program would be gearing up in 2022 for a 2023 start. The expenditure in 2022 would be $117,000. That's 1 full-time public works 4-person. They would essentially get the project, the program off the ground, get it structured, and then in 2023 we anticipate a $500,000 expenditure for 2 lead workers, one equipment operator 2, I'm sorry, and 4 hourly trainees. That is, all of this would be funded through capital, except actually not all of it. Some of it would be through the storm and sanitary utilities, because we would be also doing repairs for our 2 utilities with these crews as well. At this point, we expect this to be generally a break-even proposal, but hopefully over time, we'll gain some efficiencies and come out a bit ahead. But initially, anyway, it's certainly going to be, we certainly expect it to be just a break-even proposal. Reductions, we've got, first of all, I'll talk about the second one there on the reductions. Approximately $175,000 was accomplished by taking a detailed look at every position in the engineering division to properly classify them. And this isn't something we've done before, but it was certainly timely to do it, because over time positions evolve, and the engineering division's positions are funded by multiple sources. So this was a good exercise. It did result in $175,000 worth of savings. That was into our base budget. It wasn't a separate item for the mayor to consider. It was built right into the base budget. The item that was also taken here is the reduction of about $88,000 for median landscaping. Now, this is probably the only real discretionary program that we have in the engineering division. The reduction is mostly accomplished by reducing the area required for maintenance. Previously landscaped areas will be reconstructed with low-mow, fescue, turf, and in the narrower medians, concrete. It will result in a need for $368,000 in capital expenditures for those improvements. And it is expected that it will have some impact on the Parks Department budget, a little under $10,000 for them. And that covers the general fund budget for us. Do you want me to pause there, Mayor?
Yeah, let's pause and see if there are questions for the engineering general fund. Going once, going twice. If not, Rob, why don't you go ahead to the utilities then?
Okay, landfill should be next. Okay, landfill is very much just a cost to continue budget. Total budget is about 1.3 million. The budget utilizes 610,000 in reserve funding. We have about $5.6 million in reserves right now, and those funds came to us through a settlement with the insurance companies on the landfills. Rates are currently 50 cents per month, and we're not expecting that to change, $6 per year. We're not expecting that to change in 2022. They're once as high as $32 per year, if anybody's curious. And that's the landfill budget.
Any questions on landfill? If not, Alder Carter.
Yeah, Rob, I just have a quick question because at what point do we close one landfill and open another?
Oh yeah, that is a good question. So we are not in the business of active landfilling. We are, all the landfills that this budget covers are closed landfills, and there are 5 major closed landfills. And we do maintenance on those to mitigate the migration of gas, which is explosive. So you don't want to let that get into adjacent properties. And we collect leachate, which it's the water from the trash. We collect that in the landfill so it doesn't get into the groundwater in some of them. Some of them are older and are actually situated in groundwater, but yeah, so that's what we do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alder. Other questions on landfill? Seeing none, go ahead, Rob.
Okay, sewer utility is next. Again, essentially cost to continue budget. This is a $49.5 million budget approximately. 30 million of that is Madison Metropolitan Sewage District charges that are passed through. There, of that 30 million, there's an increase of we're anticipating about a $1.7 million increase, or about 6% for the sewage district charges. And the rate increase for the sewer utility would be about 5%. That's what we anticipate in the spring of 2022. That's $1.61 extra for the average residential customer who are currently paying $32.10. So that's a rate of $33.70-ish for that we would anticipate in the spring of 2022. Budget includes a reduction in salaries amounting to about $296,000 due to those reallocations discussed earlier, mostly to capital again. We also have a change in how the fleet charges are done, which is pretty much neutral, but fleet will now be paying our bills on our equipment so we can better track paying our bills on outsourced equipment so we can better track total maintenance for vehicles through the fleet department's database. And that is the sewer utility.
Questions on the sewer utility? Seeing none. Oh, Alder Carter.
Rob, I just have a question regarding MMSD because that's a separate entity, isn't it?
Yes. Yep. That's a separate entity. It has a commission appointed by Madison and the member communities.
Okay. So if I understand you correctly, the surrounding communities also pay money to commission to MMSD?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Other questions on sewer? If not, does that bring us to stormwater, Rob?
It does. Yep. And that is our last one this evening. Storm utility, that's a $20.5 roughly $1 million budget. We anticipate a rate increase of 7% here. That's 77 cents for the average residential customer, 11.20 per month is the current rate. Once again, this year we have $1 million for our watershed studies. We had that last year as well. Reallocation of salaries, as discussed earlier, again, amounts to a reduction of $84,000, mostly to capital. We have one supplemental request. The request is to convert an existing hourly position to a full-time conservation technician and to add 2 more greenway restoration interns. We currently have about 1,800 acres of stormwater lands. Of that 1,800 acres, approximately 970 acres are maintained as native prairie or wetland species. To maintain that 970 acres, we have targeted spot mowing, prescribed burns, hand weeding, and herbicide treatment for invasives. So this is very labor-intensive work, and it requires a good knowledge of plant species. The new FT full-time employee will have that knowledge, and the interns come in with more knowledge of plants than the average person, certainly more knowledge than me as well. So that is very helpful. Our hope is to eventually be able to convert more existing acreage to managed prairie. For now, we need staff just to maintain what we have, plus what we get each year through new development. So each year we're getting additional stormwater lands through new development. So that is it for the storm utility.
Thanks, Rob. Questions on the stormwater utility? Alder Carter. You're muted, Alder.
So Rob, and maybe this isn't in your budget, but will the storm utility still maintain the greenways?
Oh, yes. Yep.
And so for future greenways, will they begin to use some of the older greenways have a concrete path in the middle of them to direct water to whatever direction. In the future, they're going to be using more of a dry bed, do you think?
As they're rebuilt,
yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
The reason they were concrete in the first place is because they're very, very flat. But the DNR and ourselves, for that matter, we don't really want to build that anymore. So where we can eliminate the concrete bottom over time, we certainly will.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I should mention that the greenways that are not mowed as prairie or are not, I'm sorry, not maintained as prairie or wetlands are mowed. They're mowed regularly, like once a year or some twice a year. So that's the difference between the two treatments for greenways. So we have that 170 acres in prairie, and then the rest is generally mowed. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Other questions for Rob on any of the engineering budgets? Seeing none. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
And we will go next then to fleet services. Mahant?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Satya, and thank you all in the Finance Committee. My name is Mahant, Fleet Superintendent. Glad to be here. So some of the highlights and major changes we'll quickly go through. So we've increased billings somewhat because what we've done is combine 4 different facilities into one with Nakusa Trail, which is a new construction that we moved into late last year. And that included a fire maintenance shop, and the radio shop is with us. And we've combined some of the costs here of maintenance, including the utilities, and also the janitorial services are being handled through the fleet budget here. And we also made an adjustment for the GPS system, which I'm hoping in future years will save us funds as a city as we hopefully slow down in our vehicles and waste less gasoline and diesel as part of that, and idle less as well. So this budget prioritizes our apprenticeship program. So we have at this time 5 high school and technical college students working with us in various things. They're helping us in the parts room. They're helping us with our data needs, and they're also working on the shop floor with mechanical mentors. So we have 5, which is the most we've ever had. We're hoping to keep that going. And the auction program, in a bit of good news during the pandemic and in this period of shortages of semiconductors, you probably heard about the vehicles we're selling at end of life are just smashing our records by far. So we're up to 1.3 million and counting. It's only October. Our previous record all time was around 800,000. So we are doing a lot better there. A little bit unexpectedly, honestly, I didn't know this would be happening. And we also sold some old equipment from First Street that we didn't need anymore. It's part of our move. Reduction scenarios. So we take pride in doing more with less. We eliminated 2 positions that Fleet has had for many decades. A welder position and a parts room assistant position. They retired recently, and the rest of our team is doing that work. And we are confident we don't need to use these positions again. So that is an efficiency right there that'll save us a lot of money every year. I'm also looking a little bit harder at our overtime. And I think we have an opportunity to save some money on overtime if we tightened our belts a little bit, and if we were a little more judicious about it. And I've actually asked all my supervision and managers to let me know about overtime, and I'm tracking it more closely. And I'm confident in 2022 we'll use less. And then finally, for the first time ever, the city is reducing the size of the fleet, what's known as right sizing or fleet reduction. A lot of fleets are doing it right now and tightening their belts with COVID across the country. So I can't take credit for this idea, but every department with a fleet has participated with us. We put in a lot of work with all the other departments, and the department heads personally have gone through the list with us. And I hope we save a lot of funds in that area as well. And of course, while we do that, we are still going to support the mission of every department without compromise. I believe we can do that with these cuts. That's all I had. I'm happy to answer questions. I also have Tyson Ressler, the program manager, and Rachel Darkin, administrative assistant. They're really the ones that handle the budget for me, for us. And so they might be able to answer questions that I can't.
Thanks, Mahant. Then I actually see that Tyson is in the attendees list, so if we can get him promoted. Alder Figueroa Cole.
Thank you, Mayor. So can you speak a little bit more about that apprenticeship program? Are those paid apprenticeships or?
Yeah. Oh, happy to talk about that. It's literally my favorite program of everything we do. So we have 4 high school students from different Madison area high schools that are in the school's vocational education program. So if they take some basic courses in automotive maintenance at these schools, they become eligible to apply for us. We're paying them really well, about $14 an hour, I believe. Most of them work about 15 to 20 hours a week with us and attend school as well. They're getting school credit through the MMSD, and they have a very detailed checklist that we get from the vocational program to make sure that we are teaching them everything that they're supposed to learn in the 450 minimum hours they do with us over the course of a year. So we have juniors and seniors, and we also have a student at Madison Technical College as part of that. And actually, we gave him a little raise once he got into technical college. He's been with us for 3 years, and I'd really like to hire him full-time next year to keep that pipeline going if things go well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Carter.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to know, how long have you had the apprenticeship program?
We started in January 2018.
Okay. And how many high school interns have gone on to technical college? Do you know?
So we actually, one thing I'd like to do a better job of is keeping track of our alumni after they graduate and leave service with us. I know for sure about half. So we've had 13 high school students so far, and about, I would say 6 or 7 have gone on to technical school. Some of them aren't pursuing a mechanical field in their career. They find out it's not for them. We had, when we've had several students working with us in the office doing work to help me and my managers, actually. So there's different branches going on. But one thing I'd like to do is track where they are, where they go more closely, and see if there might be opportunities at other city divisions for them, and vice versa. We heard about engineering's great green power program today, and there's an opportunity to, I think, keep track of all of those graduated students or trainees in the future, have a common database for the cities so that different departments can draw on different people, especially once they graduate from high school, technical college, or other things they're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alder.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for Fleet? Alder Brevier?
Thank you, Mayor Heimham. I wanted to ask you how we're doing with our gas and diesel contracts. Yesterday, Metro Transit spoke about their diesel contract. And so I wanted to ask you about that, as well as if you could estimate for us how much savings you've been able to realize thanks to your very prolific use of electric and hybrid vehicles.
Yeah, thank you, Alder. That's a great question. So there's a couple of trends I can tell you about. We've looked at annual gasoline and diesel usage in every year, 2019, 2020, and 2021 year to date. We are steadily using less gasoline and diesel every year, as we would expect with over 100 hybrids and over 60 electric. And then the pandemic actually helped. As a silver lining, there was a lot less usage of our vehicles, and that was not really anything we planned for or did. However, as you might know, if you have a personal vehicle, fossil fuel prices are rising dramatically. So we've seen a up to 50% rise in our prices. And that is offsetting, unfortunately, the gallons we're saving. So we are definitely seeing an environmental benefit with what we're doing. And we're approaching 8 million pounds of carbon dioxide saved. But unfortunately, 2021, it looks like we're going to spend more on fuel than last year, even though we're using less.
So do I understand you to mean that we're purchasing both diesel and gas on the open market? We don't have a contract price locked in like Metro?
So I'm going to lean on Tyson and Rachel here. I believe this year we're on the open market, and we have to decide on 2022 along with the finance department what we're doing. But I'm going to first.
Yeah, I can jump in. For 2021, we have been purchasing off of the state contract. So that is a little bit more of a float price that changes. We do not have a locked contract for 2021 or 2022 for diesel or gasoline. And Metro's reduction in service, though, allowed us to purchase gallons of diesel and biodiesel off of their locked contract for the majority of 2021. So we were able to see some savings from that. But that was not our own contract, and we're actually back to purchasing off of the state contract again.
Thank you, Rachel. Do we typically use the state contract over the years?
If we don't have a locked contract of our own, I believe so. Dave or Tyson might be able to answer that better than I can.
Yeah, I can jump in here. So we annually coordinate with Finance and Metro to see what each agency will do. Metro obviously had lower usage during the pandemic on fuel. As Rachel mentioned, we stepped into that contract in the interim. We typically, between the three agencies in coordination, we typically do a float at one department and a lock in the other. So we've been locked in previous years, and Metro has floated, and now we've floated, and Metro has locked. And this hedges the city against prices going crazy, and if we do it all the same way. So we do that as a balance, and I'm sure we're going to keep coordinating in the coming years.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks, Rachel and Mahab. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Other questions for Fleet? Seeing none. Thank you, Mahanth and Rachel and Tyson. And we will go next to Parks. Eric.
Good evening, Mayor and Finance Committee members and members joining us watching online. I'm Eric Knepp. I'm the Parks Superintendent for the City of Madison. Here to present on the Parks Division's 2022 Executive Operating Budget. The budget in sum total is mostly cost to continue budget with some modifications. We will continue to seek to find efficiencies and opportunities to address the evolving needs of the system to meet our equity goals, enhance services and amenities, such as like an Aldo Leopold pump track and Clean Beach Initiative, as well as the mandated growth from our neighborhood development plans, the attachment of the town of Madison, and then also growth in the responsibilities related to non-parks assets such as medians, bus stops, and sidewalks. So the 2022 highlights and major changes. In community recreation services, one of our emphasis we have had is on working towards stable, permanent employment opportunities in our operations and across our areas. In this case, we're able to, some reallocation of hourly funds and funding streams, make 2 permanent part-time rangers 80% employees, 100%, and that'll be a very helpful benefit in the world we're in. There are some reduction in supplies in the community recreation services area as well. At Old Botanical Gardens, we see an increase in revenue generation. That is somewhat related to COVID, but it's really related to the full opening of the Learning Center. We had previously budgeted down on revenue, and we're back up to where we were before. We're hopeful we can actually generate comparable revenue with more public access for educational programs and family programming. There's a slight reduction in overtime and hourly laborers for the gardens that will impact on the edges, not hours of operation, but overall garden maintenance and facility maintenance. The park maintenance service, in the budget, you will see we expect a technical amendment coming because this conservation tech trainee I'll talk about, and then also the service itself. The park maintenance service is identified as park maintenance and forestry. As most of you know, forestry is a part of streets and urban forestry. At this point, we do have arborists on our team, but we don't refer to it as a forestry service any longer. To wit, the supplemental included supplemental funding from the mayor, included funding a full-time conservation tech trainee program as part of our Equitable Green Jobs initiative we put forth as a supplemental. This position would be focused on our more than 1,800 acres in conservation and 800 acres in general parks that are in heightened land management, natural land management standards. Ideally, we're gonna try to really orient this position towards friends groups and identifying new friends group for volunteer coordination. There's a lot of that happens in land management. We see this as a great opportunity to diversify our workforce, but also to make meaningful, reinvigorate current connections, but make meaningful new relationships in our community to support land stewardship. There's an allocation of $11,000 for the supporting some of the final Town of Madison final attachment work. That will be prioritized in late fall next year with ash tree removal, first and foremost, as well as working through the backlog of other issues. The ash trees are what we would call extreme hazards at this point in our system. There is a reduction of almost a little over $39,000 in hourly wages across the park maintenance service, and that will certainly have an impact on the edges of our operations. I'm happy to go into that in more detail. We are not exclusively route-based or service-based like on-off switch. Many of our services are interrelated and interconnected. During COVID, we've seen that very much so, where if restrooms are all open, the full level of service and heavily used, that's going to drive more resources to a restroom opening, closing, and cleanup. If athletic fields are more heavily used, there's a lot of movement in our operations. And of course, the biggest one of all of them, grass. If the grass grows fast, we're on mowers a lot. If the grass is slow, we can get to a lot of the other work. So there's some fungibility there, but it will certainly have an impact. Certainly a concern for me is always, will we stay on top of the non-parks assets to an acceptable level, such as medians and the like? Planning development services is a transition of a half of a FTE of a landscape architect position. It's fully funded in the budget, but half was capital, half was operating. This will focus that position towards capital budget oriented projects pretty well exclusively, which will certainly help on the capital budget work plan side. Will probably hamper our abilities on the operating side for the landscape architects for quick response, problem solving, team-based work, honestly, neighborhood resource team things. Some of those things could be impacted, but we think as we hire this position, we can work through that. And we're certainly happy to have the position still on the planning team. As we talked about in capital, we have a backlog of projects. And the 2022 executive budget for Warner Park Community and Recreation Center. Sorry, we have that listed on here incorrectly, so it made me mess up. But WPCRC is funded a continuation of services, which still includes the recently hired program assistant or the lead programmer, so that's up and running. We will be seeing an expansion planned next year, built in 23, that will have future implications. Next slide, please. Thank you. The reduction proposal I walked through mentioned much of this on the last one, but certainly the big one, I think, the biggest potential impact is really how the weather and other factors end up, what happens with a reduction in hourly wages. If we have a worst case scenario, there would be, I think, significant, more notable, significant impacts with trash picking and median string trimming, those type of things as we have to mow more. We're probably going to evaluate the opening dates on shelters, closing dates on shelters, and kind of edge the seasonal season just a smidgen to meet that budget reduction. In good news, we think there's a lot of opportunity, as I said earlier, with the conservation tech trainee over the longer term, medium term even, developing meaningful relationships. We think there's a lot we can do that we haven't done in the past with volunteers. And that's an exciting part of the budget for sure. With that, I think we can go to the next slide. And that's that conservation tech trainee. So this is an opportunity to provide career opportunities that aren't often a clear pathway to equitable green facing jobs. And this is really a technical position. I think Rob mentioned earlier the knowledge base that you need to kind of manage public lands at a high level. We have a number of those staff on our team, and we feel confident that with the right candidate, we can bring them on board and bring them up to that level through an onboarding and continuous training program and develop those sustainable land stewardship practices of natural areas within the park system. That's conservation land and natural areas that are maintained in that natural landscape of Warner Park, Elver Park, and the like that aren't conservation. And then again, with that intentional engagement with communities of color and partnering with organizations, we really see this as an opportunity to enhance and amplify land stewardship work through volunteers. And that's again, very exciting. So I guess I'll just go to the next slide since they're listed together. We'll just do golf and then we'll get to questions. The golf enterprise, continuation of existing services. It does anticipate the reopening of Glenway Golf Course to golf in 2022. As of right now, that date looks to be June 1. The grow-in is going fairly well this fall. Could be a little bit earlier, but that's a fair planning date. Memorial Day is right about the time. And there are ongoing issues with major failing infrastructure, courses, buildings, and equipment. That is a serious concern across the system. Less of a concern at Glenway now as far as in the obstruction of the course, but something we continue to monitor. We will continue to work through the task force recommendations that include next steps. Glenway kind of took the first focus for this year. Next steps include hole reduction plans for Yahara Hills and contemplating potential RFP for alternative model at Monona. And then also trying to continue to invest wisely in resource saving approaches to things like watering the courses. We do have good news in the 2021 year so far. We crossed $4 million in revenue this week. That is $300,000 more than the record-breaking revenue from last year. We will certainly be profitable again this year. I don't want to give any kind of false hope that that's a guaranteed sure thing and seismic shift, but it is giving us some room to move forward. And that $4 million in revenue was with Glenway closed most of the year. So 63 holes of golf produced more than $4 million in revenue. And to put that into context, the worst year, the 2018 year that some of you may recall, the major hemorrhaging of $700,000 in a year. In that year, we did about $2.6 million in revenue. So it's about 50% plus from that level. With that, I am here as well as Assistant Superintendents Lisa Loshinger, Christopher Perduro, Finance Administrative Services Coordinator January Vang, and Park Operations Manager Greg Jenin, as well as I believe Planning and Development Manager Ann Frowell. The team is here. They have helped immensely build this budget and happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Eric. Are there questions for Parks? Going once, going twice. Alder Verveer.
Thank you, Mayor. Eric knows he can count on me. Hello, Eric, and all the members of your team. I think you might win the prize for having the most folks in the meeting. So thank you all for joining us. I won't have many topics to cover, actually. I think only a couple. My first question is, since we were last together at the capital budget hearings, can you give us an update on where we are with hiring in the planning section for landscape architects?
The one vacancy is we have approval to post. I believe we have a draft posting nearing readiness. I would expect that we would post this month, Alder Verveer, for that vacancy. And my hope would be that the selected candidate would be on staff around February 1st would be my hope. It could be plus or minus minus 2 weeks plus 6 weeks, depending on the candidate.
I'm glad to hear that it's underway. I think that's kind of where we were during the capital budget conversation too. Right? So
we recently received final approval for posting.
I appreciate that. So I hope that HR and you all can work as expeditiously as possible. I'd hate to have, the delays that we've seen because of that critical position being vacant and other issues in the planning section, obviously in part due to COVID, but anyway, the delays we talked about with the capital projects. And it certainly makes sense to me to continue our trend of capitalizing these labor positions as we've increasingly done year after year in the operating budget. The other area I just wanted to confirm with you is, first, I was pleased that this year's executive operating budget is much less of a hit on operations in terms of the reductions. So I certainly appreciate that, and appreciate the mayor did not select, some of your, draconian 5% cuts that you were required to submit. So in the grand scheme of things, can you just quantify for us this slight reduction in hourlies that's proposed here? What impact that would have, if any? Would it be noticeable whatsoever? For example, in my very parochial fashion, mall maintenance likely would not be the only area that would see a cut in hourlies and seasonals.
That's correct. And I would like to definitely make sure Greg Jenin is ready to jump in and stop me when I'm wrong, because what I was trying to describe is COVID taught us that the reality of the operational decisions on hourly staffing really need to be, because the variability and the movement of where resources are needed today. I'd love to say we're perfectly proactive, but we are not resourced to be perfectly proactive. We are resourced to be some combination of proactive and quite reactive to things like weather. And COVID taught us that by giving an allotment of hours out to section supervisors and leaders, they could best align those services and coordinate those services in a more less negative impactful way, right? There are impacts when you lose staffing. We do not have the luxury of having 2,300 hours of seasonals who don't do anything. And that's about what it equates to, 2,300 hours, plus or minus a bit. What I would say you could expect to see at the mall, from you mentioned the program nature of the question on that part, so I'll get to that. I would think you would see bus stop power washing decreased by some number of hours. I think Greg had it pegged at about 150 hours, maybe a 20% reduction, 25. Shelter open days, so lower priority, non-community parks, shelter restrooms and shelter reservations. So in Elvium Park, Lake Edge, Hoyt potentially on that list. We would try to reduce on the edges the days open. So we don't see a lot of shelter reservations early in the spring, late in the fall. By shortening those up and not having the restrooms open for those, a week or so on either end, we could probably shave 450 hours of direct time. Trash picking in low volume park areas, other than that we normally do with our mow route, trim routes, reducing that and keeping it focused on high volume shelters and playgrounds and splash parks. So the Elver Parks, Vilas Parks, Bradingham Parks, where there's just the volume of users is still going to be there. It's still going to get those resources, but that's probably the biggest plurality of hours we would save of those 2,300 are planned for. Maybe 800-900 hours. Median trimming, string trimming on medians, not necessarily the mowing. The string trimming around signs, posts, and trees. And if you notice when you drive around the city, there are a lot of those things in the median, like a lot of them. We spend about 1,400 hours a year string trimming medians. We would probably cut that in half to cut about 700 hours. And then trail maintenance and conservation and parks like in Elver Park, we have the bigger trails and brush removal, maybe to the tune of 70 to 100 hours. And most likely our seasonal staffing is critical in our playground maintenance. We'd probably cut short those seasonals in construction, which is the unit that oversees playground inspection and review, by a couple weeks each of the two positions, and maybe about 200 hours. I think that's pretty close to where we're feeling today. But all of this does depend on growing conditions. There is no normal grass year. If grass pops early and goes hard and has a great growing season, every one of those impacts becomes worsened. Well, especially the trash picking and other things, because we have to spend we have to allocate more staff to a full continuous 40 hours on mowers. But Greg, if you wanted to add anything, feel free to. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot the one. Oh, elimination. Last year in the winter, we had picked up some internal park path plowing. especially in time of COVID. We've heard this for years that we need to do more of that to promote walking in parks in the winter. Given that one of our cuts would be reduction of seasonals in the winter who help with ice, we would pull back on the snow removal on most of those paths, pretty well all of them that are non-essential, non-bike path, to try to get those staff the ability to help with the ice and keep ice at a quality condition on ice rinks.
Thank you, Eric. Did Greg want to add anything?
No, I think he did a great job, but I'll just mention, because you give me the opportunity to say hello.
Greg, if you don't mind turning on your video, if you can.
I can. I don't know if you can see me, but the focus really was on trying to prioritize and minimize the impact. But I think all of us would agree, anything we do in parks is noticeable. So we are ramping up the idea that we will be responding. So we'll be in a little bit more of a reactive mode as we hear from the community about their concerns, and we will be very sensitive to those concerns, and we'll do everything we can to minimize those. But there's certainly, as we're making these adjustments and prioritizing, there will be some impact.
Thank you. Is my understanding correct, gentlemen, that you typically do assign your seasonals to work in a particular area during their service? So for example, that they're assigned to East, West, or Central? Or yes. Is that not the case, and they're really nimble and they could work one side of town one day and the other side of town another day?
No, the vast majority of our seasonals work in a primary work location hired and responsive to a single supervisor. When I talk about that flexibility and nimbleness, it's about the duties within that unit. So as Central Parks, in the rush of event season, there may be seasonals pulled off mow routes to help with setup at Lafette and things like that. Not never, but it's not common that we're shifting seasonal staffing between units.
Thank you. And so based on both of your responses, Eric and Greg, it sounds like if this reduction in seasonals is adopted by the council next month, that as of now, you haven't made any decisions as to where the reduction would be next year, geographically speaking. Is that correct?
I mean, I think within park maintenance certainly is obviously where the service it's going to be in. I think I would generally say the percentage reduction would be shared amongst all the operational sections in a relatively commiserate way. And that's a little bit when I talked about 150 hours at the mall, Alder Revere, that's probably about the share of equalizing as much as we can without creating, and honestly, playground maintenance, 200 hours would be a larger percentage in the construction service than any other percentage-wise. So we don't have it final. We're hesitant to argue that you can know what you do not know. Our seasonal staffing model is built around having a number of people, number of bodies in place by a certain date and utilized to the needs of the system at that time. I would say that pretty well every section, like at the mall, 160 hours is not a position, but we would reduce the hours of one of the hourlies from maybe planned for 800 hours to 650. In the season. That's how we would achieve that. It wouldn't be by shifting people around.
I understand.
Eric, I'll also just weigh in, if you wouldn't mind, just quickly, as COVID did teach us a lot. So we do have a pretty good idea of our parks and where we cut back and the impact and how much the community responds to it. The other part that we do want to get better at, that we're spending some time focusing on, and Christopher's adding a lot of value in helping with that, is making sure that we do a better job of not impacting underserved neighborhoods in these actions that we would take at the parks. So I'm saying we have a general plan, but we're going to improve that plan, and we're going to have a more intentional focus on not impacting underserved neighborhoods.
Thank you both. I appreciate your responses, and thanks to everyone that joined us from Parks Division. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder Revere. Alder Harrington McKinney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Eric, with the adjustments and based on top of the report, how has your planning toward completing some of the master park plans been impacted or affected? Were there adjustments that you needed to make and along that realm?
I would say in planning and development, the operating budget doesn't have any significant changes or impacts. As Alder Rivera asked about the one vacancy we have approval to fill that position. I expect to have it filled in early 2022. As is always the case, no one, I shouldn't say no one, it is very rare for anyone to come into one of those planning and development positions with the parks to jump into the action at full speed. But we have high hopes that we will get someone in who can help with those efforts, like the master planning efforts and project management efforts. It's imperative that we get someone who can help pretty directly and early on, at least at some level, with our park and open space plan update, which is coming due.
Okay, so your answer to that is that with this new projected hire, depending on hiring the right person, you will be on track to do those planning and development marks that your department has set.
I think the SIP across the 3 to 4 years is pretty close. As we talked about at Capitol, we have concerns. We added a couple projects, or we've added a project. We reinvigorated the interest in timeliness on multiple projects. I do have concerns about our ability to digest and produce a high quality planning project with the level of engagement and level of equity analysis that we expect of ourselves. I have some concerns or reservations. I cannot say that that we're dramatically off base, but it's a big plate. It's a plate that I think if we get a good hire is going to be in the realm of close to the right amount. And frankly, from project manager's level, it probably is the right amount where we would probably see the best benefit to managing our projects and keeping them on track is going to be looking on the more administrative, coordinative and data analytics and or asset management levels. That type of work is work that our landscape architects, when I mentioned earlier, the non-capital work, that's work that our landscape architects and engineers, the 5 of them do a lot of to support the division's work because we don't have an asset manager in the parks division, which is rare for an organization our size. We don't have a data analyst. We don't have an equity coordinator. Those 3 things. Those are kind of things that are the equity team, the data team, and the asset management of our system are heavily supported by our planning and development team. That's certainly a real part of where we have landscape architects and engineers working on those things because they're the people who we have who can do it, if that makes sense.
Thank you. I'll end my questioning here.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any other questions for parks? Not seeing any other questions for parks. So thank you, Eric, and to the whole parks team for being here. And I think we are on to streets.
Good evening, Mayor, Finance Committee. Charlie Romine, Streets and Urban Forestry. I'll go through this here as quickly as I can. I anticipate we might have some questions this year. Highlights and major changes, of course, is the sorting special charge. Again, I won't read the slide, but it does anticipate a mid-year start of July to bring in about 1.5 million in revenue as proposed for 2022. And then if that rate were to stay the same, anticipates 3 million in 2023. That is meant to support the increasing and ongoing cost for providing recycling services in the city. Those costs do continue to rise. Next year begins a new agreement with our MRF, which is Pelletary, and those costs are increasing for the city. Town of Madison, the final attachment, as I know has been discussed last night and today, is Halloween of next year. For the streets division, of course, the vast majority of what we do runs on a schedule. People expect things done today, not tomorrow. And then, which includes plowing snow. So that takes equipment and people. So the mayor's budget includes the employee count that we needed to provide the services to the town and not impact negatively service levels to the city, as well as some of the supply items we would need, like additional salt, et cetera. Also noted here is moving 2 parks arborists onto these urban forestry special charge. Those are currently handled in the parks budget, I believe a combination of general fund support and capital. So that just continues that long planned migration of moving budget allocation for positions over that urban forestry special charge. The employees will still be part of the parks division doing tree work in the parks, which there is plenty to do. And then lastly, contributing about 1/3 of the cost to a GIS position. The majority of that is being funded through a previously funded vacant position in the streets division. Reduction scenarios includes a seasonal hourly reduction of $73,800. To put that in perspective, that's about 4,800 hours of work that won't be available to us next year. We plan on making up for that really in 2 primary ways. One, we will go from 6 guaranteed scheduled brush collection pickups this year, plus the holiday Christmas tree collection. Next year, we would go to 5. Prior to that, the streets division would kind of roam around and do 9 or 10 collections a year. There was a map, and it was kind of who's on first, what's on second, and oops, you missed us, and people would get frustrated by that. So we actually saw that this year it was quite popular having the schedule. And so our hope there is that by reducing just 1 from 6 to 5, but again, having it scheduled out well in advance, people can be a little bit planful with their brush work and have it out at time we can guarantee collection. And probably the bigger, and I would say the other thing that we'll wind up doing is some of the tasks seasonals have done, we will have to backfill those with full-time positions, which will come from, for example, street repair that may not go out with the same number of people every day that it would now. That's not something that's on a schedule. It's certainly something we try and do a lot of, but it's not something, if the pothole gets repaired or the mat gets laid 3 days from now versus today, no one was expecting it done on a date certain. So we'll fudge some FTEs off of that, off of mowing, off of island cleaning to make up for some of the gap. But probably the highlight is we're going to wind up moving the Badger Road drop-off site from Badger Road. Right now, we operate 2 full-service year-round drop-off sites and a 3rd yard waste only site, a seasonal site out at South Point. And we had anticipated in our submission, depending on how it came out, we might have to move around some hours, but ultimately with the reduction that was necessary to balance the budget, what we decided to do, rather than try and go from 5 days and 2 nights, and then make it, maybe it's 3 days and a night or something like that, which is very confusing and hard to communicate, is just close the Badger Road site and make the South Point site full service year round. Some of that was going to be necessary anyway in the capital budget. I'd mentioned that the Badger Road salt barn is being taken down in mid to late March, and we will work with Randy and engineering as hard as we can to make sure that it gets rebuilt next summer to be ready for us a year or so from now. So we weren't going to be able to host the drop-off site at Badger next year. We had contemplated maybe trying to make something work. For example, to make something work, but it just, I don't think it makes sense with the needed reduction. So that's what we're going to look to do for next year, is run Sycamore and South Point the same 5 days and 2 nights that we have this year. That seemed to have worked pretty well for people once they got adjusted. Another concern by trying to go to like a 3 days and 2 nights is quite honestly, the sites would just be too busy at times. For those that don't know, these sites are in our public works yards, and particularly at Badger where it's really, really tight. There are times it's just conflicts with residents and businesses coming in to use the site. We're in there, engineering is in there. So a further reduction of hours at an existing site would just make congestion more of a problem. The other thing I would mention is the reduced seasonal support for leaf collection. I do believe we'll likely be able to make that up with some overtime, some changes operationally we made last year that we're doing again this year. I think are going to give us clearance to run our staff some additional overtime within our budget allotted overtime to make up for the $12,000 rounding off number that we will lose in seasonals. And quite honestly, with tough budgets, this is something we've kind of been preparing for. Typically we get a lot of seasonals from Parks. Parks has fewer seasonals to give. We have fewer seasonals to give, so we have to find other ways to get the work done. Lastly, I would mention, and very happy to mention, that the mayor has provided funding for a streets division trainee program. We've kicked in $40,000 of seasonal budget. The mayor kicked in about $50,000 otherwise to get the trainee program together. We're very excited about that. We have certainly struggled to attract and retain highly qualified seasonal people that are ready to become operator ones. It's not to mean we don't have great people and they don't want to do a good job. They're not. It's not 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, where we had people come in with CDLs and experience. And, those people are not choosing seasonal employment with the city or with streets any longer. So we really need to be able to offer somebody something more than 5-6 months of employment and a layoff. And so what this will really allow us to do is identify some of our seasonals that have great attitudes, good work ethics, and just need time to learn and grow, and put them into the trainee program. We would envision probably 12 to 15 months in the training program. The positions will likely pay the same or similar hourly wage that they make as laborers. However, they will have access to full city benefits, which really makes that currently what is $15.48 a living wage when you have the health insurance, vacation, retirement. And it really allows them the time to invest in their training with the city, for us to invest in them. And the idea is then when they finish that training program and we have operator one, our entry-level operator positions open, then there's no further qualification process for them. They'll move in there. So we worked with 236 to come up with the framework for that. That was agreeable to them. I think it's very reasonable. I think it should work, quite well for us. And I hope with some established, proven track record, it's a program that we can grow a little bit. So with that, I'll answer or try to answer any questions you'll have.
Thank you, Charlie. Alder Harrington McKinney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Charlie, exciting about the training program. And is there a plan, or I'm sure you're looking at how you're going to connect with the community to make sure that information, once that gets firm and the details are in place, What is the plan to make sure that that information gets connected to the community in a way that is manageable for them?
Sure, yeah, that's a good question. So I would say the first thing we would do, Alder, is the most, I would say during my time in parks and in streets, the most diverse group, the group of people that looks most like our city population is our seasonal pool. And so we have about 30 different places and organizations we work with when we post seasonal positions. And so it is my intention that we will start proactively advertise that these positions are coming over the winter, so that when people are looking at our seasonal positions next year, they also understand there's a trainee component as well. So, perhaps in the past, somebody looked at that and said, I can't afford to take that job without, a guaranteed employment possibility, but maybe I can if there's a realistic chance that I can qualify for one of those trainee positions and be able to learn and grow and have continuous employment. So that's the first thing, we intend to do is really push that out ahead of job postings next year using our current framework. We'll also, I hope to be able to work I will work with my PIO/recycling coordinator, Brian Johnson, to start putting out the word as well throughout the community that these opportunities are coming. And that you don't have to have a CDL and years of experience to get started with the streets division. So, like I said, we plan on pushing in the winter well before we get into hiring time.
Excellent. Thank you. Great answer. I'm complete.
Thank you, Alder. President Abbas.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlie, for your presentation and update. I have a question about sorting special charges on recycling. Could you explain a little more? How much is going to be for residential? How much is going to be for multifamily, 4-unit, 8-unit, and bigger buildings?
Good questions. Not all have answers yet. So the sorting charge right now is going to need a lot of detail to be figured out, and that will be done. Certainly, I am happy to be a part of that, but that'll be policy maker level discussions. Are we going to charge? How are we going to charge? Is there going to be a difference between residential and business? There are a lot of things that we will need to get answered. The mayor proposes this in her budget. Obviously, council will have to approve that, and then there'll have to be an ordinance passed. And so there's, I think, over the next, coming 2, 3, 4 months, there's going to be a lot of opportunity to start, working through the details of what that would look like. If you just do back of the envelope math, we believe we provide service to about 65 to 70,000 addresses. So you do the math, that comes up to 3 and a quarter or so, a month. But again, that's back of the envelope math. And I think from there, one of the things we'll have to work through is, does a fourplex get one bill sent to the owner, or does it get sent to each of the 4 tenants? And those are things that have to be figured out yet. And I'm sure will be. And it's really why our discussions about this, we didn't want to try and start this before mid-year, because it's going to take a little bit of time, to work that out.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Harrington McKinney, another question?
I lowered my hand. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Any other questions for streets and urban forestry? Alder Verveer.
Thank you, Mayor. Hello, Charlie.
Good evening.
I'll start where President Abbas left off with the proposed new sorting special charge. As you know, in the executive operating budget, the specific language includes the following sentence: the sorting special charge would be charged to customers that receive the city's recycling service and would support costs associated with the city's recycling contracts and staff time for recycling collection. So I take that to mean that, for example, the significant, I would even say the vast majority of my constituents do not receive streets division, refuse and recycling services. As you know, they're, for example, the condominium where I reside has always had private waste hauling services and recycling services. So is it your understanding that under this proposal, and obviously the mayor can jump in if at any time, obviously, if appropriate here, but that as of now, this special charge would only go to those that receive our services directly in terms of recycling?
Stalling for the mayor just in case.
But she's letting you handle it.
I can't see that we would charge it if it's not something that's directly provided. I think one of the questions we are going to have to wrestle with, and will probably be part of the discussion around the ordinances, are we going to make part of the ordinance, if you can receive our service, you either must receive the service and or pay the fee, the special charge. But certainly we have a number of businesses and residential complexes that are beyond our ability to service. And it is not, I don't anticipate that we're going to suddenly start providing dumpster services and things of that nature in order to collect $3 a month from larger residential complexes. The economics of that simply wouldn't work. So I guess a long answer that I could have made short is that if we don't provide the service, I can't see that we would charge the monthly special charge.
Thank you for confirming that. And I presume, you know, if indeed it is a special charge under the state statute, that it probably wouldn't be lawful in any event unless the services are provided. And then I was curious, and I realize this is all very preliminary, obviously, and we'll have much of the next many months to answer these questions. But when I first heard about the proposal, I assumed that it was, you know, very much modeled after the urban forestry special charge and would be a line item on the monthly municipal services bill, as you well know, as urban forestry is. But it sounded like in your response to President Abbas that you're thinking that either your small but mighty team that does the current billing for TVs and computer monitors that are left out on the terrace illegally, and you do the billing after the fact to the property owners if you have to pick those up, that somehow we would do separate billings and we couldn't work it out that it would be an additional line item on the municipal services bill for those that clearly are receiving our services, recycling services.
If I gave you that impression, Alder Revere, I'm mistaken. I actually would anticipate that it would be part of the municipal services bill. I think one of the things that's going to be difficult, there's just no way around it, is unlike the urban forestry special charge, where if you are a beneficiary of the urban forest, you are really only a beneficiary of recycling as if we collect it from you. So working through parsing out who that gets municipal services bill will also have that line item added because we provide their service, and who won't. I suspect it's going to take us a little bit of time to get right. We will probably get it somewhere between 97 and 99% right at the beginning, and then it'll take us a little bit of time to make adjustments. You know, as it did, you know, you were obviously around when the urban forestry special charge started. It took us a couple years to kind of work through all the little, details of a stormwater plot, of this, of that, right? And so I don't think it will be, I think it'll be more straightforward with the recycling special charge, but I think we will have situations where perhaps somebody gets a bill who, maybe didn't get the service, and we'll just have to strike that, right? We'll have to fix it. Hopefully that won't happen. We'll do everything we can to prevent it. But if we have 70,000 places we collect from and get it 98% right, that's still, several hundred people that might not be happy with us.
Thank you. That makes tremendous sense. Yeah, where I was a little confused in your previous response, Charlie, was when you had said, well, it's to be determined if we mail the bill or email the bill to a property owner or a landlord versus tenant in a duplex or, you know, four unit. That's where I was confused. But it sounds like you agree that it's the most reasonable, logical to bill the property owner, and obviously the tenants are paying through their rent indirectly.
I would favor that. But
me too.
We'll have to work out.
Yes, exactly. And another example besides urban forestry, of course, is our friends in engineering division having to figure out the stormwater utility billings when we created that utility, and figuring out every property owner's pervious versus impervious percentages of each parcel, more or less, in the city. So anyway, thank you for that. Moving on to.
This is why it starts halfway through the year.
Yes, absolutely. Of course. Thank you, Mayor. So moving on to my next topic. So I appreciate your discussion, of course, of drop-off sites. As you know, we had a successful budget amendment last year relating to drop-off site evening hours. So just so I understand your presentation, Charlie, under the proposed executive operating budget and with that cut of $25,500 in hourlies for drop-off sites, and then of course, moreover, the salt storage building construction this next spring, you're saying that you would close the longtime Badger Road drop-off site from mid-March through probably the balance of 2022. But and I don't want to put words in your mouth, and because this would be more controversial if you said it. But did you say tonight that you think that Badger Road drop-off site would never reopen once the salt storage building construction is complete?
So right now, Alder Revere, we have a capital budget project in 2023 to put a drop-off site at the Olin Avenue transfer station. If you're familiar with the site there,
yes.
John Nolan. So our intention is to pave the back end of that. We've met with engineering. It's all very doable. We have the project was included in the mayor's executive capital, and so the intention is that would become the new central drop-off site. It should be much better for traffic flow. It gets them out of the conflicts of the yard. I know that it is hard for people to believe, but there are times during snow events, our plows have to wait to get reloaded with salt because there are people using the yard and kind of plugging up the entrance. And so that's why occasionally I will suspend the Badger service drop-off site during particularly, gnarly snow events. So we need to get it out of the yard. The Badger site is extremely tight. Engineering uses it, we use it. And so we believe we will provide a much better service for residents once that project is done and we can move it over to Olin Avenue. We're currently in conversations with our friends at the water utility to make sure what we're doing there is okay with them. I'm sure you're aware we share a property line with them. And so we have a couple different options we're looking at to make sure we do no harm with what we're looking at doing there. So it would not be my intention, Alder Revere, that we would never have a central drop-off site again at all. I think we will have an improved one in a couple of years.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And yes, I know that you've spoken many times about the chaos of the yard, and I've experienced it myself personally. The worst that I experienced it, by the way, wasn't during a snow or ice event. It was when we had decided to grant amnesty after the great 100-year flood event, and everyone was dropping off where stickers weren't required for a period of time, dropping off their TVs and computer monitors and everything else.
Yes.
And I could not believe the chaos. And I was like, why did I bother? I almost turned around off of Badger, but I watched the organized chaos. And of course, your team did a great job trying to direct traffic and so forth. But anyway, so I totally get that. I guess I'll just editorialize here that I think our residents will very much understand that Badger Road has to close for the construction project. What I would love though is if we could, move up the timeline for Olin Avenue, or have Olin Avenue, have Badger Road reopen after the salt storage building construction, and not move until Olin Avenue is complete. I think that folks would get it again during it, saying that the yard is under construction, but and so sadly, there won't be service centrally or located in the city after mid-March. But anyway, I think it would be unfortunate if there was no service throughout then, much of 22, but then into 23, because as you well know, Charlie, I think a lot of folks think of your site on South Point Road to be in Middleton. Actually, it's obviously so far away from the isthmus. In fact, I think, doesn't Middleton surround our property? I think Black Hawk Church across the street is in the city of Middleton, or town of Middleton, whatever that is there. So anyway, you've heard me. I don't want to belabor the point further. So with the proposed executive operating budget again, and the salt storage construction, can you repeat for me, please? And I know you went over it quickly in your presentation on the slide that's on the screen here, but what are your proposed hours then for Sycamore and South Point Road next year for the normal heavy season of April through December?
Sure.
With this?
So it would be, yeah, same as this year. So it would be Monday, 7:30 to 2:45. Friday is the same as Monday. Tuesday and Thursday, we have those night hours, 7:30 in the morning.
PM.
Saturday, again, 7:30 to 2:45, and then closed on Wednesdays and Sundays. So the drop-off hours would be the exact same in 2022 as they were in 2021. But like I said, the difference, so no change at Sycamore whatsoever. And then those full-time summer hours would be out at South Point, but the whole drop-off site. Right now, you can only do yard waste out at South Point. That whole full service would move out to South Point for 2022. And I hear what you're saying on, having a central location. I think, perhaps if money is found or budgets improve. I mean, we had been looking at, trying to find something that we could cobble together Central City. But again, tough budget times make for very, hard, difficult decisions. And so that's, kind of why I went this route. And I know it's not going to be very popular for residents in the center city. It probably will be for those in the far west who have had to drive in to the middle of the city to use the site. So.
Oh, absolutely. I can think of how happy folks, for example, in the 1st and 7th aldermanic districts will be with this news. So again, sorry to belabor the point, and I haven't been to Olin Avenue transfer site actually to have a tour of it since one of your predecessors took me there, and I don't know, maybe the 1990s or something. So are you saying that there's no way in the world that we could have some sort of very crude temporary drop-off site for at least electronics and tires, those sorts of things that I worry about might be collecting on the terraces even more so when people realize they have to go to Sycamore or South Point Road? Is there any way at all we could consider, whether you need a budget amendment or not, to have some sort of crude temporary drop-off at Olin, or is it just way too tight until you do a capital budget construction project there?
I don't know if Alder Revere, I don't know if Olin Avenue would be the site. I think that there's another site that I've had in mind. Probably need to talk to another person or two first, but I think it would work, especially for what you're getting at is something, cobbling something together that's enough to be meaningful, even if it's not the full piece of it. But just to be quite blunt, I would have to have the ability to staff it, and that would require a budget amendment. So I'm happy to talk further about that coming up if you would like. I understand, why it would make some sense to try and have something central to the city. I honestly do.
Thank you. I appreciate having an offline conversation with you and other affected alders. That would be great. I certainly appreciate that. If I could switch topics, and I do apologize, I have two other quick topics here. Obviously, large item collection has been kind of a sea change for many in our community, especially that aren't engaged in perhaps some more traditional communication means that we deploy in City Hall. And when I saw your agency budget request that you submitted this summer, you said if I don't want to again mistakenly say anything, so please correct me if I'm wrong here. Did I understand that and again, this was in your agency budget request, I want to say, but that so let me rephrase this, with the executive operating budget before us tonight, would you be able to have the resources to go back to large item collection where we receive every other week service, but of course with the huge caveat that you have to have a work order so we aren't wasting the diesel driving all over the city for no reason? Would this executive operating budget proposal allow our constituents to have not have to wait a month or longer when they go online or call Sycamore or Badger with their work order?
Yeah, so I think the good news there is the mayor's executive budget allows us to do where we have wanted to transition to. Maybe as early as December or January. IT has told me I can say December or January, but essentially what it will be, Alder Revere, is you'll need to put in the work order. You can do that by calling us, or you can go online and do that. And certainly over time, we hope to streamline that process. But whereas right now you only have one time a month, one Sunday a month, you can set that out. Essentially what we're going to do is open up every single Sunday, subject to kind of a weekly cap. That cap is being set based on the number of work orders that we learned from this year. For example, before this year, Alder Revere, we had no idea how many large item stops we made. We knew tonnage, but that doesn't tell you much as far as how many stops you're making and how many people are using the service. So we're basing kind of a weekly number based on now what we understand the usage as far as stop counts are for the service. And so essentially, once we get this process stood up, you'll be able to go online and you'll be able to see 4 or 5 Sundays perhaps in a row, and be able to select which Sunday you want to put your items out, puts in the work order, and we'll come and get it. So it could lead to some locations having better service than they've ever had, simply by leveraging not driving past those who don't need us to drive past them. And it should allow us to retain most, if not all, of the savings that we needed to have from salary level when we were just short people, and just a sustainability level now of not just burning the diesel, driving around and around and around with locations that don't need service. So certainly we're going to continue to have people learning to that, look, you got to put in a work order, just like you do when you order your pizza or call for an Uber, right? That's a work order. Airline ticket, that's a work order. So we need people to do that and continue to learn to do that. But they're going to see a whole host of Sundays they can pick from, perhaps as early as December, maybe January. And the mayor's executive budget certainly puts us in a position to be able to do that.
That's great news. Thank you very much. So you're quite optimistic that would be in January, folks would start to notice the quicker scheduling options.
Should be. I haven't heard anything from IT since we met about 3 or 4 weeks ago that they felt they could hit that deadline.
That's wonderful. Well, thanks for that. And I agree. I think it's very reasonable to require the work order online or by phone. So very last thing, very quickly in closing here, when I was looking at your salary detail, I don't know if you have that in front of you, Charlie, or not, but I was a little confused, and maybe it's the GIS asset manager that you put in your cost to continue budget request to fully take advantage of our GPS system. But but there's a line item for an additional administrative clerk that I didn't understand seeing any narrative about anywhere in the budget presentation or in your agency request.
I believe I can explain that, Alder Revere.
Thank
So
you.
we had one position that was classified as something else in comp group 17, I believe it was. And so throughout the year, HR made the switch of moving that position out of that and bringing it more in line with the other admin clerks. So that's not an added position. That's just changing what the position is called and how it's classified in the budget.
Thank you. That makes complete sense. I did catch that, and for all the other agencies that went when we did away with comp group 17 confidential, I guess I just didn't see the detail.
Alder Revere, I think for all other agencies, it typically appears next to position, so you can see the 2021 adopted, but for this one, it's down under secretary, so they're not next to each other. So that's why it was a little bit less intuitive what's happening there, but it's a secretary to admin 17 in 2021, and then it turns into the admin clerk in 2022 budget.
I see it completely, Steph. Thank you so much. Yes, that's why I was confused, because as you say, in all the other agencies, they were right next to one another, and here it's alphabetical to the kind of extreme. So thank you. Just by the way, and I'm sorry I'm being so picky about this, but just out of curiosity, since I have the detail in front of me, either Steph or Charlie, where's the GIS asset manager? What classification is that?
Alder Revere, it's not in there yet. I'm working with Iman in HR now to get that classified. We anticipate that will come in at about an 18.9 or 10. And so essentially we're taking the underlying funding of an admin clerk position that we had come vacant, and then taking about that covers about 2/3 of the salary and benefits. And then so that position has been in the streets division budget, forever. That was a payroll clerk that we've been able to, the gentleman retired, and we've been able to absolve that, absorb, there we go, that work into other positions amongst the clerical staff. And we've done that long enough now that everybody's comfortable that we've got it. And so we're taking that underlying funding, covers 2/3, and then we're taking off the top of my head, probably up to like 35,000 or so from the urban forestry special charge to fund the rest of that. And that position really, the break point for me on that was when we brought forestry over, and now that we're moving into Davy Tree Keeper, that's a GIS system. There's a lot we can do with Davy Tree Keeper. There's a lot we can do with the GPS system, and there's a lot more we can do in the streets division with some of our information and data that we just, we don't have that capability right now. And so having this position come in should put us in a position to do, to take full advantage of those new systems that otherwise, what do you want to say? We're analog players in the digital era, and then this should move us into the digital age as far as being able to work this data and keep field staff in the field as opposed to trying to fumbling through things that we're not familiar with.
Thank you. So the reason why that GIS asset manager position, Shirley, isn't listed as a budget highlight in the executive operating budget is because you have to go through the HR process. And so that'll be created at some point in the future by a resolution that the finance committee will see separately.
Yeah, it should be coming through in the next, I would imagine, 3 months or so. When the mayor, when this was included moving forward, we've got our submission going into HR to get that process started here in the next week or so.
Very good. Appreciate all of your responses. Thanks. We covered a lot of territory, and
yes, we did.
It's a conversation further about drop-off sites. Thank you very much, Charlie and Steph, and thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any other questions for streets and urban forestry? Right, seeing none. Thank you very much, Charlie, and to the team. And we'll go on to the water utility. Krishna.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Finance Committee members. First off,
Kathy Schwen, our brilliant finance manager, is slightly indisposed and she's not able to join me this evening. So please be kind to me when you direct your questions. With that, we have our 2022 operating budget request for about $46.8 million. And our 2022 executive budget maintains current level of services and funding for the water utility. I'll quickly walk you through some of the highlights of the budget. The major items included in the operating budget are operations and maintenance at about $19.6 million. Debt service is a major chunk at $19.5 million. And of course, pilot payment at $7.7 million. Adds up to a total of $46.8 million for city budgeting purposes. In addition to that, we intend to transfer $2.6 million to our construction fund to cash fund some of our capital projects for a grand total of close to $50 million. And we are also tracking our fund balance, our cash position now very closely. So I wanted to walk you through 3 years of our fund balance history fairly quickly. We ended the 2020 with an actual ending fund balance of $8.8 million. And we are expecting to end 2021 with $9.2 million as ending fund balance. So beginning with that 9.2, and if you add the revenues and expenditures proposed for 2022, we should end up with about $6.6 million in the operating fund, which is roughly equivalent to 3 months of our operating expenditures, which is kind of the target that we are shooting for. With that, I will be open to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Krishna. Are there questions for water? Going once. Alder Verveer.
Hello, Krishna. I mostly want to welcome you. We were remiss in not welcoming you when you appeared before the capital budget hearing presentation. We let you off easy there, and I will let you off easy again tonight, especially since Kathy couldn't be with us. I did just want to ask you, you might know I asked Kathy a lot of questions about the rate case at a recent finance committee meeting. I won't repeat any of those. I was just curious that you might recall in the memo to the water board, it had anticipated that you would be submitting the PSC rate case on December 1st or thereabouts. With the accelerated consideration of that council resolution by the water board, this committee and the council, do you anticipate submitting that any sooner than December, Krishna?
We were shooting for November 1st, but we need to collect about 10 or 12 testimonials for the two things that we're adding in this new rate case, an expense depreciation component and an affordability component. So testimonials are a big thing with PSC. So I'm making my rounds to collect all the testimonials. We are ready, but for the testimonials. So with the testimonials, it might creep up to December 1st. We'll try to push it back by about a couple of weeks. We were hopeful of turning the paperwork in November or before November 1st, but that's unlikely now. Maybe another 2 weeks from November 1st, we may need to collect all the testimonials, but otherwise we are ready.
Thank you for that update, and obviously good luck with the PSC. I know it's a very long legal process. I also just, since we have you here, could you give us a brief overview of where pumpage volume trends are these days with the pandemic? And obviously, I know you haven't been in the city for a long period of time, back to the days when many of us were used to significant pumpage volume with Oscar Mayer and other industry and so forth that's no longer part of your customer base. But could you share with us how things are trending? And obviously, conservation is a part of all this, I know, too.
Absolutely. Alder, great question. But in 2012, we pumped about 12.5 billion gallons annually. That was the high point. We are now trending at 8.9 billion or 8.5 billion, thereabout. So there has been a substantial drop in our total pumpage, not just with our utility all across the U.S. This trend has been noticed, and that downward or the 8.9 is here to stay, which is a good news from a sustainability and conservation point of view. Almost hardwired into our everyday existence of using water very wisely and sensibly. So we are at that 8.9 billion gallons annually. And on a daily pumpage level, we are around 25 million gallons a day now, 25, 26, 27, depending upon the weather. Yeah, a couple of days ago, it was at 25 million gallons on a daily basis.
And owing to the pandemic, I presume that we're seeing a substantial shift since spring of a year ago with more pumpage and thus revenue from residential customers versus commercial.
Absolutely, that shift was very prominent.
And that trend is continuing?
For the most part, yes. It has not gone back yet.
Very good. Well, thank you very much, Krishna. Again, I didn't want you to think that you're getting a free pass every year since we didn't ask you any questions in September and with the capital budget, and here we are. So a warm welcome from us on the committee to the budget process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alder.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Any other questions for the water utility? If not, thank you, Krishna, and please give Kathy our best. Hope she feels better.
I do. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. We are headed next to planning, community, and economic development, starting with building inspection. Matt Tucker.
Hello. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Good evening, staff, citizens, other people that are watching. My name is Matt Tucker. I'm the Director of the Building Inspection Division. Here to talk to you about the 2022 Executive Operating Budget for our department. I will note that our budget analyst, Brent Sloat, is with us. I just have a couple slides to share with you. The first slide just gives you basically our agency mission and overview. We like these opportunities to remind people like what we do. From our agency. Jump down to the services that we provide. The services we provide, there's 5 of them. Consumer protection, which is commonly known as weights and measures. This is the scanner inspection, gas pumps, the weight scales, packaging, you might have at a grocery store, and responding to consumer complaints. Health and welfare, which is often commonly referred to us in the office as property maintenance. This is where we deal with the snow enforcement, tall grass and weeds, erosion control, junk, trash, and debris, things like that. Inspection, which is the construction permits and the inspection of those things. Think building, plumbing, heating, electrical, zoning. The plan review and approval service occurs there. Our contractor training program and our complaints and public inquiry response program occurs there also. Systematic code enforcement, that is the housing inspectors. People most commonly think of that. That's the response to tenant complaints. Often the general building condition complaint response, the private property buildings. Systematic inspection, which is something we're working on rolling out in our new, more regulatory environment coming in this next year. And our community team and committee staffing groups. Finally, zoning and signs. That's the zoning code review for projects, the citywide site plan review management. We're the shepherds of that project. Zoning and sign complaint responses, sign application review, permitting, enforcement, and requests for information, response records, research, and zoning letters. Lots of those things that happen in the background. Moving on to our next slide, our 2022 budget. The main highlight is a reduction basically for costs to continue. We are looking to not fill 2 code enforcement officer positions for the year 2022. We think with the people we have and an unclear future as to the cases and work we're going to be getting, we think we can move people around and meet our service demand with those 2 positions left open vacant. And we are also receiving a transfer of a admin clerk position from planning. That person hopefully is going to start in the next week, kind of completing our front counter. If you've been down here, that's basically the receptionist and a person that's going to be working with our team, connecting our front counter and helping planning and zoning deal with the customers that come in. And that is the extent of our budget.
Thanks, Matt. Are there questions for building inspection? Going once, going twice. Alder Rivera.
Hello, Matt.
Hello, Alder Rivera.
Like Krishna, certainly want to welcome you to the budget process here formally. And I'm pleased that you didn't dress up to disappoint Alderperson Furman, since you promised him, of course, at your confirmation that you would be dressing up in the future after that night. So anyway, more seriously, obviously you inherited this budget request from our friend George Hank in July. So I know this wasn't specifically your agency request, where George said to meet the 5% required cut per agency for the submittal, that we would leave vacant these two CEO positions. Obviously, I'm not excited about it. Over the years of working with our friend George, he's often proposed leaving a position or two. Well, I won't say two, a position open, because he was always nervous about salary savings and having to achieve salary savings. To his credit, he really was fiscally conservative. But I obviously am concerned about a reduction in services for many in the city, especially from an equity perspective in our T neighborhoods, which disproportionately use BI services. So can you speak to what, if the executive operating budget holds and we keep these two CEO positions vacant for all of next year? First of all, just to confirm, are they currently vacant, Matt?
Well, we do have 2 vacant positions that we're filling right now and a 3rd vacant position. And we're anticipating a retirement for a 4th vacant position.
So 2 have been hired, or they're...
The positions are closing very soon, and we'll be hopefully filling them by the end of the year. One is a housing inspector, and the other is our inspector of all trades, we refer to, if you remember from last year's budget.
Yeah, the combination with zoning and weights and measures.
A float, yes.
And so that you would fill that. That was one of the questions I was going to ask you, is if you'd fill the float or not.
Yep, those are being filled now. We were basically watching our ability to respond to requests over the last year, and effectively, I think the decision was not to fill those positions. We're coming out of COVID. We started to receive more complaints to go in and inspect properties. Briefly, we saw a surge. Then I think the eviction moratorium has affected that again. It's really hard for us to get a read on our anticipated levels of service requests and numbers, just because we've had a very unusual couple of years. But with our training for getting these 2 positions filled, which is going to be fairly extensive, we're going to have to take some time to fill these inspector jobs, to train them adequately. We're going to be able to move people around and meet the demand, we believe. That was our group kind of came to that decision. We came to that decision working directly with George. He brought us in to work on the budget.
Obviously very appropriate. So you're representing to us tonight that you are confident that, speaking on behalf of your colleagues, Kyle, Jose, Maria, that you think that keeping these 2 CEO positions vacant all of next year really would have no noticeable reduction in service. So for example, if a constituent of ours calls in a complaint, usually you have been wonderful, your colleagues have been wonderful about making an appointment and coming in practically immediately, certainly within a day or 2 is my experience. I can't speak for COVID, that they won't be waiting for that inspection if it's a complaint basis, for example.
We don't believe that's the case. We do anticipate, if we do get some surges or something like that, that we can shift people over to assist, but we're not anticipating being unable to respond to those complaints in a timely fashion.
And what about in terms of being proactive? I know we still have that issue of the state statute changing several years ago, and that had always worried George about going back to the good old days of systematic interior inspections. What's the status, whether it be that statute, and if you've had enough clear guidance from the city attorney's office or the pandemic? Has your division undertaken any interior systematic inspections whatsoever in the last few years?
I would say we have not done that, but what we have done is we've been working closely with the city attorney's office and our housing staff to formulate a plan for meeting this narrow window that exists in the statutes to restart our systematic inspection program. It's fairly complicated. It involves the completion of a blight study in an area, which will then allow us to go in and do certain inspections. And Jose Maria and the housing staff spent a fair amount of time during the COVID when we were not going inside many. We were going virtually inside buildings, but we weren't doing interior inspections to really work up this program, to test it and model it. And they've advanced the program significantly. It's not ready for the light of day yet, but they shared it with me. It is something that we are hoping to introduce and deploy in the next year. And we've been getting plenty of support from the city attorney's office in that regard. It's been going real well.
That's good to hear. And I think that's similar to what George has shared in the past. Do you know offhand if the city attorney's office believes that requires common council action at all?
I'm not sure, Mike. I'm sorry.
When the time is ripe, if you could share that plan with me, I would appreciate that. It's something I have great interest in, and as you can appreciate.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When I read George's agency budget request, my mind was put a little at ease when he said more than once in that submittal to the finance department that he was concerned about the training bandwidth for onboarding new CEOs, as you mentioned moments ago. Do you know in the past and I realize we're talking about different positions when you have the new floater, which has to learn weights and measures and zoning. By the way, is the floater never going to be involved in housing or residential inspections? It would remain weights and measures and zoning.
We think that position could evolve. The person that's in that position could advance through their career, move up, and potentially be involved in doing interior housing. But really what we anticipate is that position is going to take a significant amount of field work away. So the people that are routine field work, so the people that have that skill level can focus in on those types of tasks that are taking a lot of that we need to devote a lot of resources to. We think we can give that person quite a few of the more simple types of cases to free up the other staff.
So minimum for them, absolutely no minimum housing code enforcement that would come part of a promotional ladder, perhaps.
Not to get started. I don't believe so, but we did propose a career ladder position for it, consistent to the health and welfare, the property maintenance inspectors. But we kind of were. I'd have to look at the position description again, because we think that it might afford more flexibility in that regard too. It's a very new thing for us.
So if the executive operating budget is adopted in its current format, would the two vacant positions, were those both mainly minimum housing code enforcement? Were they property?
Minimum housing, yes.
They were both minimum housing?
Correct.
Okay.
Systematic.
Yeah, systematic.
Yes, sir.
That's what I thought. All right. Well, let me ask you then, switching gears a bit here, but also keeping with the concern about your staffing level. When BI assumed Town of Madison service, can you remind us first, when was that effective date?
I don't know the exact date. I think it was November of last year.
Uh-huh. What has the experience generally been? I know it's everything from, plan review to the types of services that we've been discussing.
I would say it's been pretty heavy in plan review and permits and inspections. It's been lighter on, we'll call it like Chapter 27. We just haven't had that many of those cases come through. We've had a few, but not a significant number. I think we're still attempting to make those connections that we're here and this is a service that we provide. Either it's from referral from people that are contacting the town and referring them to us, or us reaching out like via some of the public meetings that we're having with the town. But it hasn't been, we haven't seen a substantial increase in cases.
Do you know how the revenue assumptions been made in terms of building permit activity in the town?
I don't. I'm not sure if Brent knows that.
I can just switch gears if Brent does want to speak
Alder
to
Revere, we're already providing building inspection services in the town under the agreement with the town. So that was the fire services and inspection services. And we get a payment for that.
Yes, that's what we were just saying. Yes, I think we're all aware that we took over that service in late 2020. Yeah, no, the question was, and I didn't want to call on Brent, but Matt offered up Brent.
I mean, he may know, I wasn't sure. And I don't actually think we break out town from City of Madison.
The revenues were estimated to be about $200,000 for building inspection permits.
From the town this year or next year, Dave?
That was embedded in that payment that we received this year. So full year of service.
Uh-huh. And so, since you're unmuted, I can ask you, Dave, you know better than Matt probably, but looking at the revenues on page 9 of the budget, the building permit estimate, could you speak generally to how we estimated the next year's assumed building permit revenue?
Generally, we're assuming that the pace will slow somewhat from 2021, but will still be significantly higher than the amounts collected in 2020. We typically don't have multiple years of rapid growth. It tends to plateau. So I think we're estimating about 6.4 million of building permit revenues in 2021. And that will, drop off a little bit in 2022 to 5.8 million.
And obviously it helped that we raised building permit fees earlier this year.
Yep.
So
that's included in there along with what I mentioned about the town.
Uh-huh. I'll just say very anecdotally that the number of developers that have been contacting me in the last couple of months doesn't show any signs of downtown development slowing down anytime soon. So hopefully we'll exceed our projection in building revenue. The last topic, and thank you very much, Dave. The last topic I wanted to broach with you, Matt, is going from kind of more macro to micro, is the longstanding graffiti co-payment removal program. As you might know, I've been in contact with George and Jose Maria about this off and on throughout the year, particularly since we experienced unprecedented graffiti downtown from the unrest last year, and it's continued to some extent into this year. Do you know what the current financial condition is of the graffiti co-payment removal program, both for 21 and what's built into your cost to continue budget for next year?
I can estimate. I know that we still have a few $1,000s yet to go. Jose Maria did bring me up to speed on that before he left for vacation for this year. We still have some monies available. He didn't think that it was a cause for concern when we were talking. I'm not necessarily aware. Maybe Brent can help me with numbers and where we're at for next year.
I'd also just jump in and say that in previous year, as we've had these extraordinary costs, we've been able to transfer funds from Office of the Director to supplement those budgets to make sure that we had enough to make it work. And I anticipate we could do the same in the future if we had extraordinary costs.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. So I'll just share with both of you and everyone else that, as I mentioned to George before he left, and to Jose Maria since, that if there is any need for a budget amendment, either this year or next year, as it relates to this service, I'm obviously very interested. It's something that in the past, George had expressed concern about advertising too widely because he realized it was a relatively small amount of money within your already very, small budget that is almost all labor. So I just wanted to make sure that you all were aware that I hope we never turn anyone away, because in some prior years we have turned some folks away saying, sorry, we've exhausted our funds for a given year. So thanks for in advance if we ever come time to running out of funds to help with that program.
We'll keep that in mind. Thank you, Alder Revere.
Thank you. And then with that, thanks very much for all your responses, Matt. I hope we weren't too hard on you with your first budget presentation of your new career here. So welcome again to this process, and thanks for your responses, and thanks to Dave and the other Matt for helping as well. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any other questions for building inspection? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Matt. And we will go on to another Matt for CDA, both housing operations and redevelopment.
Thank you. Matt Walker, Executive Director of the CDA. I also have Larry Kilmer, our Deputy Director, and Suzak, our Finance and Grants Manager. So the CDA, as an enterprise agency, did not submit any reduction scenarios. We have our two main arms which we'll cover tonight. So the redevelopment arm, which works on redevelopment and owns assets that are not related to public housing. And then the Agency 92 is the public housing and Section 8 voucher program. So I'll take the first one, which is redevelopment. So our redevelopment budget is largely costs continue, but there is an increase in staff time being charged. A lot of it some of it from housing operations, some from real estate, to manage some of these new, largely capital initiatives, the State Street pop-up shops, which flows through the CDA, as well as redevelopment of the Triangle. Public housing scattered site disposition. So this is moving public housing into the MRCDC and redevelopment side, as well as the larger Village and Park redevelopment. And Larry, he can cover the other side of things.
Thank you, Matt. Yes, good evening. So my name is Larry Kilmer, the new Deputy Director for the CDA in charge of housing operations. So just wanted to highlight a few things Matt had already mentioned, that similar to the redevelopment side, the public housing side is an enterprise agency, essentially meaning that no city budget dollars are coming into housing operations. So just wanted to remind our council members of that. The two specific programs that we run are the public housing program and then also the Section 8 program. And both of those programs receive the budgets are based on the federal program, federal dollars coming in from HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development from the federal government. That being said, similar to the redevelopment side, our budget is a cost to continue. And really the increases that you see are in the agency buildings due to increased capital fund revenue that we're seeing from HUD. On the voucher side, looking at budget increase to allow for what we saw through the mainstream voucher program, which is a new program recently, as well as which was 59 vouchers, as well as the new emergency housing voucher program, which we've received 69 vouchers, and kind of our best guess at increases that HUD supplies annually of about 10%. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions on the housing operations side as well.
Thank you, Matt and Larry. Are there questions on the CDA budget? Going once, going twice. Seeing no questions for the CDA. Thank you, Matt, Ann, and Larry. And we will go on to community development.
Thank you, and yep. Thank you and good evening, Mayor and Alders. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you tonight. I'm Jim O'Keefe. I serve as the City Community Development Director, and I'm joined tonight by several CDD colleagues, including Lynette Rhodes, Yolanda Shelton Morris, and Hardy Garrison, all of whom are available to help answer questions that you might have in just a few minutes. I want to begin by taking just a moment to acknowledge and to express my appreciation to the Mayor for once again sparing the community development budget from spending reductions sought from other agencies. Though it may appear that there are reductions from current year spending levels, if you look at the budget summaries, these merely reflect decisions made last year by the Council to provide one-time funding commitments, commitments that were not renewed this year. For example, there's a $250,000 addition that was made to the COVID Relief Fund for housing assistance, money that has since been replaced many times over by federal funds, and a $100,000 increase, one-time increase for a peer support contract. In terms of other changes, the executive budget restores funding for the Community Building and Engagement Program for 2022, money that had been redirected in the 2021 budget to support that same COVID relief fund. The CBE program funds will be allocated through an RFP process that we will conduct early next year and bring to the Council our funding recommendations for it. The budget moves two other funding streams affecting the CDD budget. It sends $150,000 previously dedicated to the Emerging Opportunities Program for use instead to support homeless services. Most of that money will support agency requests that have emerged through a request for proposals process that is currently underway. You might recall that those recommendations were presented to this committee just last night. And lastly, and I think you discussed this last evening, funding that currently supports a peer support contract administered within CDD will transfer instead to public health, where it will be used to help implement the broader violence prevention plan, the roadmap to reducing violence. I want to quickly draw your attention to four other highlights in the executive budget that reflect previously made council decisions, so they're not really new, but they all pertain to the use of American Rescue Plan funds. And so all are one-time outlays of budget authority. First, the 22 budget contains $650,000 to expand youth employment opportunities. This supplements other ARPA dollars that have been allocated in the current budget. And this money is available to support a new summer service corps initiative for youth and a wage subsidy program that will benefit both young people and the BIPOC business owners that will employ them. The budget puts $1 million toward a new renter's choice program that will seek to try to reduce or provide an alternative to security deposit requirements for renters, requirements that often pose barriers to people as they attempt to secure rental housing. The budget puts $2 million toward a fund that will be used to help pay for future operating expenses associated with new shelter facilities. And lastly, it provides $50,000 to support division efforts to help determine how we might better reach and serve a broader, a more diverse group of older adults through our senior center as well as through other senior programming. So those are the highlights of the Community Development Division budget, and I'm happy to entertain, along with my colleagues, questions that you may have.
Thank you, Jim. Are there questions for community development? Going once, going twice. Alder Harrington-McKinney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Jim, there was quite a intense and robust discussion at last night's budget hearing, so I won't go into that. I have two questions. One is related to the $50,000 slated for the elderly or senior citizens programming. Could you say more about what that looks like and why it's $50,000 and that amount and not more?
Yes, Alder, I'll try to respond to that. What it looks like really is an effort to bring in a third party to provide some assistance to CDD staff to buttress community engagement efforts that have already been made to try to reach more diverse communities within Madison who by and large do not access older adult services and whom we don't see frequently at the Madison Senior Center. So the idea is to try to reach out to a broader population of the city to understand why we're not connecting with them for services and to try to do something about it. As I mentioned, we have made some efforts of our own. We didn't get a lot of traction. We had some conversations with officials, with residents of color, but we didn't feel that we got deep enough into that conversation, and so we're looking for assistance to expand that effort. And the $50,000 was set after consulting with other agencies that have done work, that have employed third-party organizations, consultants to do this kind of work. We're hopeful that it'll be sufficient to do what we need to do.
Okay, as a follow-up, is it my understanding the $50,000 is more consultant work? Is that what I'm hearing?
It is, yes. It's to reach out to do a more thorough job than we've been able to do, to reach into communities of color and again learn more about why we're not connecting, why they're not taking advantage of the senior center or other older adult services, and try to make whatever adjustments we can to change that.
Okay, my final question is that I'm really going to be strong on collaborations, and is this something that the department can collaborate with the resource teams that are already working in neighborhoods, like under TART?
You mean the neighborhood resource teams?
Yes.
I would certainly anticipate, Alder Harrington-McKinney, that there would be an effort to reach out into the community and to engage individuals and organizations, including organizations like our own NRTs, in that kind of conversation. So yes, I would expect that we would.
Okay, that's great, because what I'm hearing is that we often reach out for contracts with outside agencies, but the neighborhood resource centers, the neighborhood resource officers, they're already involved in the community as well. The team is already involved with the community. And so I would hope that that is a resource that will be used as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Verveer.
Thank you, Mayor. Hello, Jim, and colleagues that are here with you. First of all, I only have 2 topics I want to cover. The first one is kind of continuing with Alderperson McKinney's theme relating to senior services. As you know, Jim, because I presume you were with us from the beginning of the meeting, we did hear a fair amount of testimony this afternoon from members of the Southeast Asian community concerned about services to them. Were you here for that testimony?
I was, yes.
Yes, I figured you were. Thank you. So I'm looking at the budget presentation on the bottom of page 86, and in particular, the language relating to services for older adults. And I wanted to ask you about this in any event before the testimony occurred today. But the second sentence states, quote, contracts will be determined following and, so there's a little typo there. It says following and RFP process in 2021. There was kind of similar confusing language about an aging RFP process. And I remember at this time a year ago at the 2021 proposed executive operating budget. Can you confirm for us that there is no new aging RFP process that's either been underway this year or will be underway in the few remaining months of this year, and what the plans are for the next timeliness of an aging RFP process? And then furthermore, confirm for us that the funding in the executive operating budget of the little over $750,000, $780,000, does include continued funding for Freedom Inc., at which I presume many of the folks, or all the folks that testified, were participants of their services for Freedom Inc. and Hmong Institute, that those contracts would continue to be funded under the mayor's proposal at the current funding levels.
Yes, Alder, I can confirm both of those. The funding in this budget will continue the existing contracts, including the 2 that you mentioned. We had hoped, and I think as we put this budget forward, we had anticipated conducting a request for proposals process that would allocate funds beginning in 2022. That effort got a little bit bogged down. We realized that it was getting too late in the year to undertake that process. And so we're looking to conduct it earlier in 2022 in a way that would set the stage for allocating funds for use beginning in 2023. That will allow us, if there's an opportunity to seek additional funding in the 2023 budget. As you know, the point in time when we undertake the RFP processes, the funding processes, which typically occur in that 4 or 5 or 6 year timeframe, it provides the opportunity to make requests for additional funding if we think it's warranted. So we won't be undertaking that process anymore this year, but we'll be preparing to do that early in 2022.
Thank you. That makes a tremendous sense, Jim. And obviously, I presume that was the case as a member of the Committee on Aging. It would have been quite a surprise if we were going to be embarking on a process in the coming weeks here. So I don't know if that requires a budget amendment, but certainly I would request that we have that either as an errata item or a budget amendment if need be to change the narrative for that paragraph relating to aging RFP process timing. And then switching topics, again, only one more topic to go here. So as it relates to the Burn Criminal Justice Initiative grant that the city received, as you're well aware, the $1 million over 3 years that that your division is facilitating for us. Can you please provide us an update? Because I haven't heard anything since I saw the posting for the position this summer. Have we been able to secure, have we hired, and has the person been brought on board in that LTE project coordinator position?
Yeah, Alder Rivera, if I may, and Mayor, with your indulgence, I'd like to refer that question to Yolanda, who's been the division point person on that project.
Great, thank you, Jim.
Good evening, Alder. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Yolanda. Thank you.
Okay. So the position, actually the posting for the position closed today. We unfortunately had to repost the position due to a failed recruitment the first time. So we hope to have that person in place in that position by early to mid-November at the latest.
Very good. Out of curiosity, thank you for that, Yolanda. Out of curiosity, can you say, did we have many applicants in the first round, or were there hardly any?
We had a handful of applicants. We did do first round of interviews and second round of interviews, but we unfortunately could not find someone who kind of could really come in and hit the ground running and tackle some of the roles and responsibilities of the position. And so it was decided among the strategic planning committee to repost the position.
Very good. And you said that that's just closing, and so you'll be closed today. Thank you. And so you anticipate that interviews would be in the coming weeks, and we might have someone on board in November?
Yeah, I would say mid-November at the latest.
Okay, thank you. And so has the UW been doing much work on this, or are we kind of in a holding pattern until that LTE project coordinator is hired?
The work still continues. The strategic team still continues to meet. We actually are going to be meeting this week, Thursday. So we are still meeting. We are still working on other initiatives that can be taken care of without this person being in place. And so that work is still continuing.
Very good. Thank you very much for the update. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And thank you, Jim, and for all your colleagues that are here. And thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Carter?
Thank you, Mayor. Jim, based on the testimony today that we got during public comments, is there any concern that the funds that are designated for the senior Asian community is not getting to their clients? And is there any plan to do an audit to find out?
So Alder, what I heard earlier was less a sense of whether the funds that are provided for older adult services are getting to clients, and I think more a reflection of the fact that the funding that we provide and the services that we provide with those funds are not direct services to individuals. They tend to be services that support the provision of case management services. They support older adult activities that promote healthy aging, that do things other than provide direct financial support to clients. That's not what those funds are intended to be used for. So I think that mean, I don't doubt that the people that we heard from tonight are expressing legitimate concerns about needs that they have, but I don't think that what we're doing through the programming dollars that we allocate are intended to meet those specific types of needs.
Okay, thank you. And then my next question regarding the consultant position, that the RFP that you'll be sending out sometime in the near future, are we looking at also bringing in the cultural diversity coordinator that works with all of the centers, the New Bridge centers, to the table?
I would certainly expect that the work that we do through this contract and through this consultant will reach out to any and all organizations that are connected to older adults in Madison. I think there will be a specific emphasis on communities that, again, that we don't see a lot of, either at the senior center or through the older adult programming that we currently support financially. So I think we'll do that. We'll use NRT teams, but the focus really is to try to find a way to connect with populations in the community that we've just not been very successful to date in connecting with.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for community development? Seeing none. Thank you, Jim and Yolanda.
Thank you.
And we will go on to economic development. Matt.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I'm Matt Mikolajewski, the Economic Development Director for the city, and I'm here to present the EDD Executive Operating Budget Proposal for next year. We really only have one major change, major highlight within the EDD budget, and that's the transfer of the funding that we use for Business Improvement District programming from the Planning Division budget to the Economic Development Division budget. As some of you may know, the representative on the Business Improvement District on behalf of the city are Alder Revere, and then also Saran Oak, our new Office of Business Resources Manager. And so we felt that now is a good time, now that we have a new OBR manager who will be stepping into the role of the city's rep on the bid board, that it was a good time to move over that bid programming funding from the Planning Division to the Economic Development Division. And that funding was basically maintained at its existing level. Otherwise, our 22 executive budget maintains our current level of services and generally maintains our funding for the EDD. In terms of reductions, the 22 budget proposes to hold open a vacant real estate position for all of 2022. The budget proposes to decrease our support for the Madison Region Economic Partnership from down to $20,000 from $30,000 this past year. It is important to note, however, that $20,000, which is now the proposed budget for 22, is more consistent with what the city's contribution to that organization has been historically. About 5 years ago, there was a significant increase in our support to MadRep, and we're now bringing that down to what was the historic contribution. There's a proposed reduction in the Food Policy Council support budget from $10,000 to $3,000. And this really reflects the amount of funding that the Food Policy Council actually uses in support of their work. And I should mention that funding for the various programs that are governed by the Food Policy Council are going to be maintained at their previous levels. And in the case of the HRAP program, there's actually a proposed increase, and that appears in our capital budget. So even though we're reducing by $7,000 some support for the Food Policy Council itself, we're actually seeing a net increase of funding for some of those food-related programs that we provide. And then finally, there's a proposal to start allocating additional time to some of our tax increment finance districts, and to do this over a general allocation of my salary to the TIF districts rather than looking at specific billings. So this is sort of an administrative change in how we manage the billing of my time to TIF districts. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you, Matt, our third Matt of the night. Are there questions for economic development? Going once. Going twice. Seeing no questions for economic development, Matt, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we will go on to the Office of the Director, back to Matt number 2.
Thank you. Matt Wachter, wearing my Planning, Community, and Economic Development Director hat for this one. So the Office of the Director, we're a relatively small office that exists to provide sort of support services and coordination for the other divisions in the department. There's really not a lot of changes in our current level of funding. The one significant change is that we would be recreating a vacant administrative clerk position into a public information officer to serve the broader department. And this would really help coordinate the proactive communications on large projects and initiatives, but also our department receives, weekly requests from press and from the public, so to help coordinate those responses as well. So that is Office of the Director.
Thank you, Matt. Are there questions for Matt? Going once, going twice, seeing none. Thank you very much, Matt. And our final agency of the evening is planning. Heather?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Finance Committee. I'm Heather Stouter, the Director of the city's Planning Division, and proud to round out your evening tonight. We don't have major highlights to share this evening. I think the executive budget maintains our current staffing levels and reflects some slight changes that I'll go through in our service provision. First, the reductions. We will be removing about $10,000 from the budget for the Mayor's Neighborhood Conference. And as many of you have been involved in prior years, this is a major interagency effort. Usually the funding is spent on facility rental and food for attendees. And particularly for this year, next year, and perhaps in the years to come, we're comfortable with this removal, not quite knowing what the situation will be for large gatherings, even next year. And we certainly have a lot on our work plan that can fill the time that staff would have otherwise been spending planning for this event. A $5,000 minor reduction in the placemaking funds, and that just better reflects our actual spending. Currently this year, we do have funding left in that line item. And as Matt Miklojeski mentioned, the transfer of the support for the Downtown Business Improvement District to Economic Development. And as Matt Tucker mentioned, the transfer of one staff person to building inspection for the new information clerk position at the front desk in PCED. And I wanted to mention a couple of our supplemental requests. First, an increase in the funding for the communications effort to prepare for the Town of Madison attachment. This year already, even though spending didn't start until well into the year, we've already spent about over $25,000 on that effort. And so this would increase the effort as we near that October 2022 date for a total of $54,000 for next year. And then a very small increase in our city's contribution to the Greater Madison Metropolitan Planning Organization. And that just takes full advantage of the available federal matching funds. Happy to take any questions any of you might have.
Thank you, Heather. Are there questions for planning? Going once, going twice, Not seeing any questions for planning. So thank you again, Heather.
Thank you.
And Dave, anything else on the budget before we refer it?
That is it, Mayor.
All right. So then, let's see. We'll go with seniority. Alder Revere. President Abbas had to leave us. So would you make a motion? I believe the referral is to the Finance Committee meeting of 10:25.
I'm happy to do so, Mayor. Does it not go back to the council for an operating budget public hearing before then? No?
I think it does. It gets referred to the October 19th.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I didn't see that on the budget calendar, Dave, but.
Yeah, so why don't I do the following? I move referral to a public hearing at the Common Council meeting of October 19th.
Second.
It moved and seconded to refer. Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of referral? Seeing no objection, that item is referred. And a motion to adjourn would be in order.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your evening.